All set.
Good.
Perfect.
You're good to go.
Okay, so this evening, we will try to keep discussion to 5 minutes per individual. Obviously say your piece, but try to keep things rolling smoothly. Obviously, me being late doesn't help, so I apologize for that. We will begin with introduction of the members of the finance committee. Roundtable. Oh, roundtable, sorry. We'll start down here.
Hi, I'm Lowry Moyer.
Hi, I'm Kent Allen.
Christine Gator.
Kathy Whitehouse.
Lisa Cholet.
Natalie.
And then we will start with who's going to be reporting out.
By default, our presenter is ill, and our other presenter had a conflict, so. Well, first I want to just start out by saying that when this came together, we were a very diverse group of people and of thought. And in the end, barring a gaffe from me towards Ms. Gator, which I have apologized for, and I will apologize in public again for that. We all worked very, very well together. And ultimately, the recommendations that you're going to see from us are well discussed, well thought out, and unanimous. And I think that's super important because we're all coming from different walks of life, different political point of views, different life experiences, different values, well, we all have about the same morals, but you get my drift, right? We represent everything from one business owner who was there for at least a couple meetings to add input for that, and residents, but some of us work from home, large families, small families, children, no children, very diverse. So when we started this process, we started out with kind of setting some ground rules and how we wanted to discuss it. So we wanted to make sure that all of our discussions and the things that we were seeing and the data that we were seeing stayed within our roundtable, so as to not make the process impure. And then from there, we basically set out a whole bunch of priorities. And then we were given 3 green dots. I don't know, you split yours in half. What is it?
I think it was 3.
3 or 4 green dots, and we had to put those all the priorities that mattered to us. And from that, we came up with our priority list and how we dictated how this rate structure would be. And that was the obvious ones, which is revenue sufficiency, the stability, making sure we can cover all costs to deliver, costs to service, capital charges, so those loans, everything. That we were within the bounds of the law. And then aside from that, one of the biggest priorities that we had was that we wanted to provide a rate structure that the base rate included essential use. So that those people that are on fixed incomes or low income, need to be on a real budget, they know that for X number of dollars, I can have 3,000 gallons of water. And we went between 2 and 3, but we settled on 3,000. And why that was important is because right now, everyone pays $66. That does not get you a drop of water. That first drop costs you more money. And we didn't feel like that was being good stewards to our community. So that was one of our number 1 priorities. We wanted to make sure that whatever impact this had on the different customer types was fair, but the minimum that we were doing, if there was going to be an increase, which when we went into this, we still don't really know. I mean, we have an idea on some, but we don't know a dollar amount, if there's going to be an increase, decrease, but that impact was minimized in everybody's pocketbook. We wanted to make sure this has been something that the town community, everyone has said since I've been involved with this, is that everyone is paying their own way. So new customers are paying their own way. So that tap fee part, all of that. So that what had been happening previously with the current residents kind of taking it for the new people and the new businesses that were coming in, we wanted that to stop. And then the cost recovery between classes, the impact that my family has on the system is not going to be the same as PSD, right? Their impact is gonna be much more than what I do to the system, and there needs to be a cost recovery in there to differentiate between the types of classes. So that's the biggest things to know from that. And in all, when those priorities were set out, we worked with Roundtable to make sure that the base rate was always covering the cost of service. So that's chemicals, personnel, everything but the capital charge for improvements and for future improvements. And from that, all of the base rates that you see will include all of those things. One of the things that Kathy and a few other people mentioned that we thought was a good idea was that there's a separate line item that tells you this much of your bill is the capital charge. And that capital charge is for current building and future building, so that we never find ourselves in this situation again. And so kudos to them for thinking of that and really trying to break out our bills so that when you get it, you can see exactly what you're using: water, your base rate, your usage, your capital charge, your sewer, everything. So from there, I think that's the biggest priority. Yes, Kathy? Kathy's the one that helps me not forget anything. Okay, so in looking at rate structures, first we tackled single family residential rate. And so as we looked at all of the different options, knowing that we wanted to have that 3,000 essential use included in the base rate, we had some different options in the way that we were charging. And so I'm trying to think how we came up with this. So we liked the base rate with tiers. So the more usage you have, the higher you're going to pay. And those tiers are broken out into gallons. And I know what the commercial is. And the residential, it makes sense. I think it goes to like 5,000 for the first tier. And then the next tier for your higher usage, it's going to be a little bit more. And so that gives people the ability to choose to conserve or not conserve without putting a mandatory anything on you for that, right? And so it kind of, we feel like the freedom of choice in controlling your own bill is very important. But if you're one of those people that doesn't use more than 3,000 gallons, you're not paying for all those people that do, which is what had been happening. So our recommendation was with the tiers, which we also looked at a 2,000 gallon minimum instead of a 3,000, but the percentage of users within Wellington's, it was minimal. 3,000 and captured a lot more families and quite a majority of families in the winter time, right? So 40% of the residents in the town have non-potable water for their irrigation. So we were really looking at, let's look at winter, because nobody's watering their lawn in winter. Well, maybe a couple crazy people, but mostly no one, right? And looking at what that looks like. And when we looked at the 2,000, it didn't make a huge difference on the budget, as I recall. The pricing stayed about the same and actually went up just a little bit for anybody that went over about 4,000 gallons. So it was actually more cost effective to do the 3,000 encapsulated within the base rate. And so that's why we charge that. We didn't want to do a uniform rate, which is just the same price for every gallon. The cost is higher, dramatically so. And in essence, you would see when you're looking at this chart, the darker green is 2021 existing rates, and the lighter green is based off of those rate charges or those usage amounts, what the other rates would be. And so you would end up seeing an increase in quite a few of those bills, especially in the summertime. So we chose the 3,000 gallon to encapsulate as many residents at a tiered rate to encourage or give freedom, however you want to look at it, in terms of water conservation and controlling your own bill. With the multifamily rate structure, we ended up using recommending that exact same tier structure. They actually have a lot less use per household. And if I remember, how do you remind me? Is it still 3,000?
Yep, option one.
It is still 3,000?
Option
Okay.
2,000. Right.
Right, so there's more users in the 2,000, but typically people that live in an apartment, they're gonna have a lower income, their budgets are gonna be a little bit tighter, so we just applied the 3,000 across the board. One, in essence of not penalizing anyone for living in an apartment, and for consistency's sake, because we have a public works department that has to be able to implement whatever rate structure we're recommending if you guys approve it. So no need to add extra work without a good reason. And a lot of the same arguments that I made with the residential would also apply to the multifamily. One of the interesting things that we did learn is that it should go down dramatically because they were being charged per user, right?
Unit, yeah.
Unit, and
Yeah.
now, so they were getting that base charge per unit before there was any water used. So,
Multiple tap fees.
yeah, it was excessive. Understood why that mistake was made, but this corrects that.
Multiple
So,
base rate, the base charge was being put on every person in a quadruplex rather than it being split up four ways.
right. So then if you have a building that has 4 units, that base rate is gonna include the first 3,000 gallons, and then anything over and above that would be then taxed off, and as a landlord, you would decide how you wanted to divide that up if it's all one tax. So,
So the chart here that says average quadruplex, that's for the whole entire building. And you divide it by 4 or, you know, whatever, however, this one's a quadruplex, so you divide it by 4, but it would be divided up. So it's not like, oh my gosh, they have a $99 bill. It's like.
right,
Divide by 4.
and you're talking about hundreds of dollars difference, which is important because they were paying more than their own fair share, right? So. Commercial, is it commercial next? Okay, so commercial, so your businesses. So one of the things that we realized very quickly is that there's 120 businesses, is that right? About 120?
Yep.
They run the gamut of business types and uses. We only have one active brewery in town, right? Even though there's other breweries, there's only one that actually is brewing here in town. So their impact to the system is gonna be different than the brewery that isn't, right? And you have different sized restaurants, you have retail shops, you've got H&R Block. I feel like they probably don't use a lot of water here. So when you were trying to come up with a commercial structure, we wanted to make sure that it encapsulated most of the people at one rate in terms of low usage. So as not to penalize those businesses that don't have a huge impact on the system. And not trying to penalize the ones that do, but again, our focus was making sure that everybody was carrying their own load, that personal responsibility piece. And through that, it really just like, it's kind of 3 bites of the same apple in essence with the choices that we had. The tiered rate, which is what we recommended for the other, a seasonal rate, so that those businesses that are slow in the winter wouldn't have a big impact and would see that higher price in the summertime when they're busier. But that isn't all businesses. So that one, pretty quickly, we got rid of that one. And then the uniform rate again, where you would pay the same amount across the board. But ultimately, even the uniform rate ended up being more costly to the commercial businesses. And going back to our priorities, we were trying to minimize impact. So once again, the tiered structure was very important. Now, keeping in mind the residential tiered structure, I believe is at 5,000 gallons is the first
I think
tier,
it's 3 to 7.
or 3 to
3
7.
to 5 isn't it?
Oh, you're right, 3 to 7, right? Whereas with businesses, commercials, the first tier is 0 to 25,000. So it's definitely scaled for usage, for restaurants, for higher impacts, so that they're not, if they had to grow each time like residentials grow, all our businesses would run away. So, but what's important to note when you're looking at these graphs is that there is going to be an impact to businesses. And I think we all recognize that that's unfortunate, but because we applied the same standard to each class, what it really kind of told us is, in essence, a lot of times some of the residents were carrying a little bit of that load because the businesses were so low for so long. And
Maybe the
we,
businesses did not, if you didn't know this, the businesses did not get charged that $66 base rate at the same time the residents started getting charged that. That
that was
started
more
this
recent,
year.
yeah.
So they had like 2 years without it.
Right. And so, like, I think we were all mindful of the impact, but looking at, one of the biggest ones is about $112 increase on average per month in the summertime. For a business. That's a good chunk of change, but businesses have avenues to make up that money. Residents don't have that same avenue to make up that money. And residents have been paying the higher rate, and based off of the information that we got, that may not have actually been very equitable. And so by doing it the way that we did, we're equalizing it out and choosing the rate structure that happens to coincide with the rest, but choosing it because it has the least impact on the businesses, because that was important to us. We were trying to not single out any particular class of user and look at everything with the same standards each time. So that's our recommendation on the businesses. And then finally, we have irrigation taps, which there are not a lot of those in town. Those are freshwater taps meant for irrigation, that are not part of your standard residential tap or your commercial tap. And you'll see from the chart, the light green is dramatically higher than the dark. I believe the original rate on the irrigation was
$5, $5 a month, unless they used water and then. it wasn't
to
much.
something a gallon or 1,000 gallons. Yeah, it was only like $5 a month base rate. And then just a few dollars per 1,000 gallons. So not very many users. This is the one that's gonna see the biggest impact. And we went with, we go with the tier date on this one as well,
Seasonal rate.
or seasonal
They
rate.
want the seasonal.
Yeah, seasonal rate,
Because then they
because
can
it makes
save
the
about
most sense, because they wouldn't be paying a whole bunch of money in the winter time for nothing, right? For just having the tap. And we felt like that was important. And this will be just me personally speaking, this particular statement is that I would just ask the board to be mindful of the impact that it could have on these people and be ready, willing with options on how we help them. Right? Because there aren't a lot, so they could feel very singled out. But I think it's also important, again, that equitability piece, and that's not what I well, whatever. I'm making up dates now. And that's, I think we all feel that way, as far as we don't want to slam this right in somebody's face, but at the same time, there's a point where you have to draw a line and start moving forward with how it's done right. And those people that kind of get caught in that net, we just need to be willing to work with them, find a better solution for them, figure it out. But they had been getting a really good deal for a very, very, very long time. So that is our recommendation on the seasonal rate.
Can I say something?
Yes.
One of the things that we did discuss with this particular instance was that if people were gonna see a large increase, that we could entertain, or you could entertain a phased approach to implementing that so that it doesn't hit all at once like it did the residents.
But with keeping in mind, in order to phase it in, you have to find a way to account for that lost revenue, and it can't be on the backs of the residents or the commercial
And
customers.
we were phased in. There was about 2 or 3 months where we were charged $35 for the
Right.
base rate, and then went 66.
Yeah,
But it couldn't
But not
drag
an
on.
Right, it could drag on
Right.
forever, and it's
Right.
pretty short.
and that was something that I think was one of our more animated discussions when that was first brought up, was like, we don't want to continue to see a continued misstep in terms of people not carrying their own weight or not doing things in a way that is directly tied to data. This is cost of service and all of that. In terms of the sewer rates, which we did not spend. Is it even in the packet?
Yeah, but that's what I-
Oh, it's just a little blurb, okay.
Um,
We did not spend a
could
lot.
we, before we go to sewer?
Yeah.
Can we kind of discuss?
Yeah.
The commercial rates, residential rates? Like
bet.
give the trustees some opportunities to ask questions
You bet.
possibly. Any trustee Gator, do you have any questions on anything that's been presented so far?
Overall, I really like what you guys have come up with. Obviously, we need to see what some of those numbers are gonna come out with, because if our base rate is still gonna be $66.
It
Doesn't
did.
help much, which is great. So once we have some numbers behind it, but
We'll
I,
get some water with it.
it's nice to get some water with it. That's true.
That high.
I appreciate the thought process of really looking at the tiers, because I know that's something that I have said to our consultants when they were coming on, was that we need to look at, I've got 8 people in my household, I should be paying more for water than my brother, that's just him, right?
Right.
I'm a lot bigger of a drain on the system than he is. And I like that. And this also, I like what you said, giving people a choice as to, hey, if you want to go and save a bunch of water and not have a yard, you can have a low bill. If you want to have a great green lawn, that's on you. I did have a question with the irrigation taps. So is that like farms or like parks, or I'm a little confused.
You'd
as
have
to
to ask them who it is.
what is irrigation, like, what are we only selling treated water for irrigation? No other purpose.
So we actually, there's several businesses in town that have an irrigation only taps, or that's
Oh.
even separately. There's HOAs in town that have irrigation
Okay.
taps for green spaces that are metered individually.
Got it.
just
Okay.
Not tied to any homes.
Okay.
We actually have, changing code that would require, certain new business types, and I'm hoping Cody will jump in when I say it wrong. For both, commercial and multifamily in the future to have an irrigation, separate tap for irrigation if they have.
Okay.
local irrigation.
That answers that question.
And there's about 30 in total.
And Megan's right,
Okay.
this would be for areas where there's not a non-potable
Got
system available, but they have to have water to support their outdoor.
Got it. That makes sense. The other major question I had right now was, I appreciate you guys talked about having a separate line item for capital charge, so that that's set aside. And so I guess it's more of a charity question. Are we able to set that aside into like a restricted fund so it doesn't accidentally get pulled into something else if we have that? Can that be done? So that's just something from a staff standpoint. I mean, board can say otherwise, but I think if we're gonna do that, I think we should find a way to have those capital funds are set in a restricted fund, so we don't accidentally wind up with them being used to pay for operations.
And I will say, the staff, including Charity and Megan and Michaela, everybody was great. And like a lot of these things, like the line item, we checked with them before we put it in our recommendation, because again, we were also trying to be mindful of not overtaxing public works, right? Like, it's not cost effective if you make the work twice as hard.
No, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. Obviously, you need to see it with numbers, but I'm appreciating the thought process. I really like the priorities that you guys came up with as to where these are things we're gonna look at. I think that's huge. So that's all I got at the moment, Mayor.
Thanks. I know one question I have of those, roughly 30 that are doing the irrigation. How many are those HOAs?
Some of them are HOAs, some of them are businesses. I can get a detail, but I mean, I can't really share that, but.
Okay.
Account by account,
I just want to make sure that we're not like stealing from Peter to give him the fall in the sense of like lowering the water rate, tier system, and then your HOA fee goes up kind of deal.
That's probably gonna happen, but that goes back to
But yeah, I mean, we need to pay for
paying your
service,
own way,
right?
right?
Yeah,
So-
we need to be fair and equitable across
Yeah.
everybody.
The
Yeah.
residents have been significantly subsidizing businesses and irrigation customers for a very long time.
Right.
And so at some point, and as someone who is very conscious of affordability, you have to pay your own way. And so while it may be uncomfortable at first, it's just not fair for the residents to have to do that when, like Lisa said, they don't have the means necessarily to increase their capital.
Right, and HOAs are recouping those costs across 100 or more residents.
Yeah.
He says
Or
HOA
households.
has enough for a pool, so.
No space for a pool.
Well, so, yes, I just want to touch base on that. Trustee Pete, do you have any questions on?
I do. So I have a few. So I know it sounds silly, but the capital charge, is that separate from the base rate? So is there gonna be an additional charge on the water bill?
Where's he at?
Oh, time.
He can answer.
Give Todd a second to chime in. I've been trying to email him to make sure he can hear us and that he had access. He hasn't responded.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I was having some difficulty there. So can you repeat the question for me?
Yes, the capital charge, I was just informed, is on top of the base rate and tier charges. So is that,
No,
No,
oh,
I
that's an
don't think
option.
that's.
Oh,
how that
got it.
works.
okay.
That's
so-
why I was saying he can explain to you how the capital charges worked into all that.
Okay, so the base rate, say we have a base rate of $66. Is the capital charge gonna be in addition to the base rate?
Well, the way that we've structured and the rates that you see or the bills that you've seen in the stakeholder report there, when we presented those, we presented it as one base rate. And within the base rate, there's a couple of different types of charges in there, and the capital charge is one of those. So if, for example, if the base rate came out to be $10 per bill, $5 of that might be the capital charge component, and the other $5 might be related to meters and billing and that sort of thing. We've just not separated out on the rates. We just incorporated the capital charge within the total base rate.
Got it. That answers that question. Thank you.
Just an example.
He gave us some sample. of What it was like.
Examples with or without.
Oh, got it.
So if you don't have it separated out, it's a higher base rate. If you did separate it out, it's a lower base rate, and then it's a separate line.
But
Okay.
we want on the bill to say, you know,
More
the
itemized.
base rate is
Yeah.
$30, and so the capital charge is 19.
Got it.
For those two.
Right, so it'll show you
That's
base
an
rate
example.
is cost, there's a definition for it.
So you know where your money's going.
Right.
So people
So that makes
understand they're
sense.
paying for maintenance and repairs and that type of thing.
Right,
Right, and it would make a lot more sense to me if I'm reading my bill and I see that base rate broken out. I know, okay, this might stink for right now, but I see that I'm investing in our water plant, so I might not get stuck
Feel
with
so
a
terrible.
massive bill in 10 years again.
Yeah, the
Right, well,
$19
and
is gonna
keeping
go
in
to-
mind that that includes that essential use, the 3,000, which should
Right.
cover most customers. Now you're just getting more for that money.
right.
Got it.
And the base rate, so on that, like the fourth page of the packet, it explains exactly what the base rate is. And we talked about including that definition for customers so that they understand. And then the capital charge would be broken out. So if the base rate was $36, maybe $30 of that is your base rate. And then it would say capital charge $6.
Got it.
Essentially, you're still paying $36, but people understand what they're getting, which is important.
Absolutely, and very important if we can separate it out on a line item where that funding can only be touched for those capital improvements. So my next question is, on my math, when I was trying to crunch numbers and figure all of this out, I may be completely off base. I have the subsidies coming in at almost 80% from residents to businesses. Is that accurate?
It has been, and I will tell you, because I love all people in this town in all of those different classes. It was appalling to me to see the burden that was placed on the residents. And I think there was one bill that was like $5 for the month, when some residents were paying upwards of, $150, $160, $190. So for me, it was imperative that we fix that issue immediately.
Got it. Has this been happening for a long time?
I can't tell you the exact amount of time,
Well-
but
I mean, so,
the rate structure just wasn't supportive of that type of equity.
so the residential rate structure, when it changed, when those rates changed in 2021, 2020, end of 2020. And then again in 2021, right, in 2021. So that was the first rate increase that residents had seen in a very, very long
I think it's
time
like
too.
15 years.
Yeah,
So I
it was a
want to
long
make
time ago.
sure that we're just aware that it was just over a year ago, right, that those rates changed. And then we're also now, 90% of our water usage in town is residential use. And residential revenue. And so when there was a need to really adjust and determine that in order to qualify for our loans, we had to make some changes. The move was to do that with the quickest way possible, which was the 90% of the town consumption, which is the residential rates. So now that we are able to look at this more holistically and review it again a little over a year later, now we have the opportunity to make sure cost of service is reflected in all of the rates that we develop for all different user types. So I want to be
And I
careful about
apologize. That's,
talking about a dramatic burden that the residents have been carrying for some extended length of time, because it's not really that. So that's,
yeah, I'm sorry.
it
And
is
town
definitely
did,
time, it is definitely time. We have the opportunity now to make sure that the cost of service is reflected in all of the rates we charge for all of our classes.
and that wasn't, so that, and I apologize if I made it seem super dramatic. That's just, I'm very dramatic. So, thank you. I think it's important, yes, to understand that it hasn't been 10 years.
It's been 2 years.
It's been a couple of years. However, because of the need to address the situation so quickly, there was a need to act fast. And yes, 90% of the customers, that's where you can find your revenue, right? But at this point, the way we were able to look at it, we could look at it a different way. So I apologize if I made it very dramatic. Those of you at home, it has not been years and years.
Well, and to her point, I think part of where that it felt dramatic as we were looking at it, because those huge increases happened at a time that families were struggling the most.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I know I can speak for my family in particular, when my water bill quite literally tripled at a time when my income was a third of what it had been. And I had my kids home all the time, so my usage was higher, like everything, it was very compounded.
It was.
And I think we've all been talking about the water for so long and how high the price is that it feels like it's been forever. It hasn't, but when you look at the changes in these graphs, you see that the residential customers, including multifamily, have been paying more, at least based on 2021 rates, right? Even with capital charges included, than the other two classes, right? And that,
I mean, that's what we're here. to
as
address.
residents, can be frustrating, as watching people struggle can be frustrating.
And looking at those on fixed incomes was really important as well.
Yes,
And low income families, and saying, okay, you don't use X amount of it, extraneous amounts of water. So why would you be paying more than this business owner? Or, I mean, just comparison, I think that's where I got dramatic, is I saw this bill at $5 and this bill at almost $200.
That's where mine was coming from when I started doing the math, because I'm like 238% on irrigation and I about cracked.
So I was very dramatic in that meeting, as you can imagine. So,
Yeah.
but the important thing is to protect people and to give them what they need to live. Right? And include that in the most equitable way possible across all the businesses, which is what we really try, or all of the users, which is what we tried to do, is look at what are you using at your, what is your essential use, whether you're multifamily or single family or irrigation, and how can we make that most cost effective for you? But that essential use for life is really what it came down to for me.
And that's part of why we bounce back and forth between 2,000 and 3,000,
Right.
because we didn't want to penalize the individuals, right? Or couples who don't do a whole lot, right? They have 2 plates a couple times a day or whatever. But by just going up an extra 1,000 gallons, yes, there was a very small portion of the population that's going to be paying for more water than they use. So maybe they can have a pool party or something. But it encircled so many more people that it just made more sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, and it allows freedom.
Do you have further questions?
I have one more on the irrigation side of it. when you guys are looking at the seasonal rate with the capital charge,
Mhm.
and I think it's awesome because they aren't only utilizing it seriously when they need water
Right.
outside. That is guaranteed only watering outside, not using any of the irrigation water inside.
Right, this is
their-
one tap. It's
You can't-
totally separate
Okay,
from
perfect.
anything you would be doing inside.
And does this cover, say, when new development comes in and they do end up with these irrigation taps? When they plant sod, you'll see sod in the winter and fall as well. I see that the seasonal is June to October, but I've seen sunny weather in March. I've
Right.
seen planting and seeding in March. What are you guys doing to cover those additional costs when the developers do end up planting late in the season or early in the season?
So one of the things you want to keep in mind is that their impact on the system if they're watering in March is significantly lower than their impact on the system when they're watering in July,
When
right?
everybody
Like
else.
on the actual treatment facility.
So in the winter, they can still water. It's just a much lower rate. It's about, so it's 1301. This is example, right? Is that it would be $13 in the summer per 1,000 gallons. In the winter, it's only $6.50 because everything that goes into that calculation of that number, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure
What
he'll tell me.
examples are you looking
This is stuff from our work session.
at? Okay.
So,
I got a
and we
question.
can show you. if you
These
wanna
are
see it.
ballpark things, if we'd done this if we'd done the roundtable a year ago, that's what the rates would have been this year. Now we're gonna have to reevaluate everything, or these guys are gonna have to reevaluate everything, to fit 2023, and so
Depending on the budget.
they
numbers,
said
we'll
that right at
dictate
the
this.
beginning of the packet. Don't take any of these numbers, and that's for, as the gospel, okay?
Right.
Because we are, going to, nobody knows.
Right, so like in this example, your base rate is going to depend on the size of your tap,
Mhm.
right? And then your volume rates are lower in the winter because you're not tapping the system. It's not gonna hit that peak of overload because not everybody's watering in March.
But still
Right.
using water, correct?
But you're still using water, so
Got
you're
it.
still paying for it.
Got
You
it.
just will get the benefit of paying less because it's March.
So I'm curious, as Board of Trustees, is there something we can do in development agreements that if they are a new development and planting sod or seed, if there's something we can do to ensure that they're not taking advantage of the empty space
Yeah, so
here
that
and
would be
getting
something we
a,
would address
yeah,
later.
well, just
Well, so
making
you
a
would
note
be
of it.
overcharging them just for the sake of overcharging them, because these numbers, if I'm wrong, tell them to correct me. But these numbers are based off of cost of delivery and cost of service and cost of that water. And in the wintertime, you have significantly less users, therefore the water costs less. So if you're, and I'm not saying it's wrong to work something out with the developers, but essentially they're not doing anything to the system.
But we're here to talk about,
And the
And
utility
guys
will
went
actually be
over
making
tonight,
more
you
money
know,
because
Yeah.
we've got water sitting there in the big
That would
tanks
be
that we're
money we're
not
not counting
using.
on.
And so it would just be extra money
Can I-
anyway, so that's why we didn't fuss about it.
Can I add to that too? Part of, one of the things we wanted to make sure didn't happen was to, like Lisa said, overtax the staff. And so if we're looking at new customers coming in versus existing customers and changing that, time frame for one versus the other, then billing gets a lot more complicated.
Got it.
Yeah, it can't be done on an individual basis. We have to do it by those 4 chunks of people.
Got it.
Without driving these guys nuts,
Right.
getting hiring another 200 people for the water department.
Got it.
Just got a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
I like to hear real numbers at times,
Me too.
like on your particular bill.
Mhm.
How would it affect you with this new rate system?
Oh, well,
With
I
your
can
rec-
tell you.
Are you with the recommended? Is that what you're?
With the
looking at?
option,
I can answer that. I went through and ran my bill for
That's right.
July.
Mhm.
And I keep my grass watered and I water my gardens.
Mhm.
My bill will go up in July, $49 a month.
Okay,
And I'm happy to do that because
right,
I want to keep my grass looking good and I want to water my gardens.
so
But during the winter, my bill will go down. because we have the,
What was your base rate? 120?
my base usage.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta
There's
remember
got-
sewer is a separate thing.
Yeah, sewer is.
So we didn't look
Oh.
at them together. We
Oh,
looked at
okay.
them as separate.
So I have the $66 plus the usage,
Right,
Right.
okay.
and just taking the water portion, my bill would go up about $50,
Right, the
right?
numbers that we had, Dave, was, right now it's $66 plus the 3,000 gallons, and that's like
No,
another
you don't
12 or
even
$15,
get
but that was before. Well, we didn't, so it was like $66
$66
plus
before a drop of
another
water.
$15 or
Right,
something. So then, so if they change to this new system, this is just the fantasy thing, but I mean, they had to work
Based
out.
on
what it
real
would have
data.
been this year.
Yeah.
The base rate would have been $49.63.
And that included 3,000.
Right, and so if you didn't go over 3,000, you didn't have company, or, you know, it was too cold to take a shower every day or whatever, you would pay $49.63 for your water instead of 66 and 15, you know, $80.
So for me, that's about $30 less a month than what I pay right now.
So another question too is, I know right now we go from what is it, 1st of October to the, 1st of April? And that's kind of what they base the base price on.
No,
Is that-
January to
January.
March.
For sewer is January to March.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was cutting down quicker.
Oh, goodness. That's why I always say FYI, watch your water use in
Okay.
January, February, March.
Last question, and this is real quick. I know on businesses, we definitely don't want to hurt them because I know especially with what we got coming, probably a recession, whatever. Who knows? We want to make sure it's as easy as possible on the businesses. How does our rates now, how will our rates compared when we get this change compared to the communities around us like Fort Collins, Greeley, whoever?
So I can tell you based off of being a restaurant in Fort Collins. The highest users, when I was looking at this, when we were going through it, was consistent with the new rate, was very consistent with what I paid in Fort Collins.
Oh, really?
And as a matter of fact, was still a little bit less than what I paid. So, I mean, as a restaurant, my water bill was pretty high. I mean, I had a bar and the whole thing, you know, and this, I mean, it's definitely right in the ballpark from a business standpoint. I think it's more than well, it's just equitable, right? But I don't think it's overburdensome. Your bill's gonna
Yeah.
go up, but it's not gonna go up like $900,
Okay.
right? Like,
Well, I would that just be really careful about that, right? Because we,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
gonna
maybe
be-
somebody's
It
money.
will be very, very, very dependent upon the type of business
Right.
you have, the way you use water, when you use water, do you use it in the summer, do you use it in the winter? And like we talked about, you know, the tiered structure for commercial gets difficult because there's not a super consistent way to think about how much water a 3/4 inch tap commercial uses, because a 3/4 inch tap could have a restaurant with a bar. It could also be a 500 square foot retail store.
But that's why we
Um,
went with the tiered rate, so that we're paying for what they
So,
use.
a big question for Megan on that. So do we not have meters on our commercial taps? They don't have a meter like the residential? There's no meter to track how much water goes through?
No, they absolutely have.
Oh, okay.
100%,
Oh, okay.
100%. I'm just saying,
We won't know how much they are going to use, but we will know how much they do use once they use it. So we can't tell them ahead of time. We know it's going to be this because we don't know.
well,
how.
I mean, we have historical use,
Okay.
right? So we can do some bill comparisons for folks when it's
Okay.
necessary, for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But we can't really speak for across the board, how much it's gonna go up, but it varies so much from business to
Yep.
business.
So, yeah.
That makes sense.
We, you know, it could go down, it could triple.
Well, probably.
It's like if you're
commercial
business in a
would go
greenhouse, it's gonna be more expensive than a bar.
We also, on the tier structure for the businesses, it also gave the businesses that use them more the ability to say a restaurant has a dishwasher that's old and uses a lot of water. It
Yeah.
gives them the ability to say, well, maybe it's time I upgrade and conserve a little bit
Right.
and look at funding to upgrade some of their equipment. So it does the same thing as what it does for the residents.
Right.
Well, if I want to water my yard. Well, maybe I don't. Maybe I want to put in some energy efficient, some water efficient
Yes.
plants, right?
I saw some great astroturf the other week.
Yeah. So it makes it fair to everybody,
Yeah,
not just,
I think people have the ability to control their use. As a business owner now, but as a former restaurant business owner, I think that warning that this is gonna happen, an opportunity to come in and sit down and see what the impact is gonna be on their bill. But they have a way to recoup those costs if they were huge, right? And which will suck for the rest of us that frequent those businesses, right?
Right,
But-
they will raise their prices.
But
That's what it is
ultimately,
about
if your
it.
water, and this is gonna sound way worse than I intended, but I don't know how else to explain it. My feeling is if we're being equitable, yes, we need to be conscientious of the impact. And like I said, I think it's important that we are working with the people to see what we can do to help them. But if your bill goes up $100 as a commercial user and you're a restaurant owner, if that $100 breaks you, you probably have bigger problems than your water usage. And
I still just, I really want to
Yeah.
caution talking about dollars against it because
I was
it's
giving
not.
an example.
I know, but it does, just when we're talking about numbers, it can give the impression that that's the kind of.
We have no
increases-
idea. I think we've made that very clear that every user is different.
can you?
My whole
can-
point is that
excuse me.
we,
Can you please respect
Okay.
Megan's wishes?
I just am nervous as we're broadcasting to the public and we're talking to the community and we're talking about something that's very sensitive. I just want to make sure that we know that there's no one sweeping standard, especially when, and I don't want to get pegged for trying to, for favoritism of some kind. I just want to talk about the fact that a 3/4 inch tap commercial business varies significantly more dramatically in the water, the variation of use than a single family home of any size or lot size in town. So there is more spread and variation that can happen from a 3/4 inch tap and how they use water for commercials than there is across any combination of single family homes in all of town. I
But
just
keep
think
in
maybe
mind-
That's a comment I just want to highlight.
keep in mind the tier structure and the gallon usage is also dramatically larger for the commercial than it is the residential. So they have the ability in their tier to use a huge amount of water compared to the residential that uses a small.
Their essential use.
Yes.
That's like, it was 25,000.
For the first
Yeah.
year, yeah, rather than.
I
7
have
or
one more question for Megan. Megan, if we do have businesses that view this and are concerned, and they start hearing tier rates and stuff like that at our following meetings, how do they find out their usage and how it's going to impact them? Do they reach directly out to Public Works to schedule a meeting to go over it? How are you guys going to?
We actually have that in our financial
Oh,
database.
perfect.
We can look up the meter, the historical consumption report, and we can give them an estimated bill going forward based off of the tier usage.
Got it. So it gives them ability to try and figure out, so they're not like having sticker
Yeah.
shock at the end, whether it's good or bad.
If they want to come into the municipal services building, we can pull those reports for them, show them what they historically have used, and then give them an estimate of what their new bill structure would look like.
Got it. Perfect. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that. So if people are concerned, they have options.
You're good. Yep.
And there was another thing, even though we all mentioned that, that the residents have been sort of carrying the commercial people for the last a year and 8 months or whatever. We weren't thinking of how can we recoup that money or anything like that. It was like, we're starting from whatever day they end up changing the rates from January 1st, whatever day. It's fair as of that time, because nobody was being vindictive or trying to
No,
get back
not
or anything like
punitive
that.
in the least.
Yeah.
No, it was, this is just what is fair. And Todd, Todd from Raptalis, who wasn't involved personally at all with the town and the water rates or the businesses. You know, he just was, he would do, he's the one that did the numbers. So it was just, what do we need now to spread out the costs to keep, so we have the savings account and we get everything run and we buy water, which may or may not, which will be going up also, the cost of water. So everything goes up.
Yeah.
Always.
Thank you for that. Trustee David.
A lot of make comments or questions. Well, first of all, the logic and reason behind the models makes so much sense, and I really appreciate that. And I think it's really, obviously, you guys have worked really hard on this and have provided really good examples and models. So I want to thank you guys for that. My question regarding, well, the most important thing to me is affordability, right? And we keep talking about that. I know all these plans are designed for affordability. I do want to highlight something that was mentioned earlier and then other considerations. It's been touched every once in a while from other things, but you know, for the irrigation, for example, a lot of those examples would be something split potentially through a HOA fee across 200 houses. So even though it's significantly more when looking at it from one overall bill, it makes sense that that wouldn't be such a significant change to your any person, any single family household that would be affected. So that makes me feel good, although looking at that image will shock people. Okay, so we need to be prepared for that. The other thing is regarding commercial, I'm curious, did you guys apply a lot of the same reasoning with the commercial tiers? Like, for example, choosing 3,000 instead of 2,000, did it include more or the majority of businesses rather than the other? Or a larger tier
I
quantity?
think part of the problem was, again, there's like 120 businesses that range
So it's
everywhere. Like, there isn't really any, like, more than 3 businesses that would be relatively the same,
right. So
right? And so that's why those tiers are so large. So that first tier, and Todd would probably be able to tell because we did talk about this, that first tier grabs a majority of the commercial users, right? So we tried to make those first tiers always encapsulate a majority of people.
Okay, I would love to see that distribution. So that's one thing, because we are talking about such a significant range. So that distribution within those tiers would be important to me. The other thing that I want to talk about is regarding affordability, is if there's a significant increase in costs for commercial businesses, that is not something that they just eat, that is passed on to their customers. That affects affordability of our community as well. So if we have, for example, the most expensive beers in northern Colorado, that's not a business that wants to stay there.
Sort of like our most expensive gas.
Yeah.
Right. But on that note, though, there is one brewery in town that's using our water.
Right.
The other 2 are offsite.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, that brewery is not one of the largest users of water in town by any means.
Sure,
Right.
but, and again, it's based on their business, their model. I don't know how exactly they determine their costs or whatever, but I would just have to consider that when we're talking about the overall picture of affordability, that's part of it. And if
But then
people
if you have to recoup that cost somewhere else. So
So
if you make it more
someone else will
affordable
pick up that
to
cost.
commercial users, that revenue
Oh,
has
I'm
to
not
come from
recommending,
somewhere.
I'm not recommending.
Right, no,
I'm
I'm
just-
just saying.
I'm just
like, yeah.
acknowledging this. So, but that's something I want when we're thinking about overall affordability. And if the solution then is, oh, just don't go out more, then that's not a solution either. So I want to make sure when we're looking at the real numbers, when we're finalizing the tiers, when we're finalizing the actual costs, that is something that we consider, overall affordability and how that might be passed on to the customers. I also noticed for the residential, you guys had the average, which really doesn't apply to commercial users, but you also had an example of the highest user or high users. I would like to see that modeled out as well.
And it was.
It was.
So we had various charts. I mean, so many charts. We had charts of charts.
Sure.
So, and we did look at the historical information and what was, the highest user and the lowest bill and all of those things when making our, recommendations and, having our discussions as a team. I think with affordability in mind, what Kathy said is really imperative here is that looking at starting from a clean slate, how can we recoup the cost that it takes to run what we need to run? And make sure that everybody is paying for their essential use, whether it be irrigation or commercial. How can we include that in that base rate so that people feel like they're getting something for the money that they're paying
Right.
initially? Right, that was all a consideration. And
If you
then,
look on page 5 of 57,
Commercial
On
doesn't
that
include
chart,
essential.
it does show,
oh, sorry.
it does detail out an average user and it does detail out a high user for residential rates.
Okay, yeah, I'm talking about commercial. So I saw that, and that's why I appreciated that. I think I would like to. see that.
But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a point and say that we did consider all of those things.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to make an astronomical increase for anyone.
The other scenario I was considering is not all the irrigation users are an HOA. So what if it is a singular business that is using the irrigation thing? They're not distributing it across 200 households on a monthly basis through HOA fees. I'm curious because I did super rough quick math, my computer died, but I was looking at like $4,000 difference annually. And again, I know that's related to your usage. You could probably improve that. But if these rates were to go into effect without a phased approach of some sort, how would we expect a business potentially that has that irrigation tap to suddenly switch all of their lawns to xeriscape within that year to acknowledge and use less water? Like that is a big burden. If someone does want to do the conservation choice and say, I don't want to pay for this extra water. I don't want to pay the new rates. I want to conserve water. I don't want to use as much because that's what we're encouraging. If they had such a big property that was so significant, I don't know, I'm thinking of per inch steel right now. They have beautiful lawns everywhere. It's gorgeous. So if they suddenly decided the irrigation tap and the usage of that water is so significant that we need to switch our landscaping, switching over for such a vast amount of area to xeriscape is not a cheap option. And that might take a while. And that would be hard. So that would be extremely expensive. So I'm not saying against anything for anything. I think the reasoning is wonderful. I am behind it wholeheartedly. But what I do want to do is put it and apply it to real businesses, real people, and see what their experience would be like. So that's just my input, but I don't have any other questions other than I would like to see a model of real numbers and those kind of things through the budgeting process. But
Well, and just to what you were saying, I think one of the challenges is like, we talked about that, like the impact. I mean, we saw the same stuff plus more, right? The question is, if you do a phased approach, right? Where does that revenue come from? Because this whole thing is
Yeah, it's a
built on
balanced
revenue
equation. Yeah.
stability, right?
absolutely.
And so then where do you recoup those costs?
Yeah. but
Right,
what
so
I'm
as a
seeing-
town, that's why I said you guys have to, my personal recommendation, not the group recommendation, is to be willing to reach out and work with those people so that there are people that will have a significant impact, and I'm very empathetic to that. And I'm sure on an individual basis, there is a way to help them in some way, shape, or form, but ultimately this
Megan,
is
that
based
a
on.
fact, Megan? Is there a way that we could work with individuals?
One of the things we're hoping to be able to bring in next week, 7 days, is, yes, is to offer some options for phasing in
Okay,
of certain things, or certain, mainly probably the commercial or the irrigation.
irrigation.
So just as options, so we can see what it would look like.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect.
I do have.
But I don't know about a
Yeah,
singular.
I'm gonna bring it back to Trustee Gator real quick and then Mason, because he hasn't spoken yet.
Yes, I think
Okay.
this might address some of what we're going through is my understanding, because we don't have any revenues for our budget that we're talking about later tonight for water and sewer. Partially because we need to decide what we're doing for expenses to then determine what do those rates need to be based on our budget. So my assumption is that once we kind of have a rough idea of this is the budget the board is more or less okay with for water and sewer, then you guys will take those numbers, plug it into what the roundtable's been going through. And then I don't know if this will be provided next week or at one of our other discussions for rates, we will actually be able to get some of those high users, average users that will be looking at, if we move forward with our 2023 budget, this is what that would look like. Is that an accurate understanding of why we don't have those numbers today?
That is correct.
Okay. So we will be getting those numbers, but you guys are kind of waiting for us to give you a rough idea of what we want in budget, and then you'll go get those numbers, and then you'll bring those back to us.
Exactly right.
See, Mason?
Yeah, no, I would say the same thing, you know, I'm very interested to see just some kind of real world data behind this and get some, you know, to just see what we can do with what the approved budget will end up being. Love the fact that you guys have included, you know, something in the base rate so that people are actually getting something for paying that base rate. That's very cool. But otherwise, I think the two option ones that you guys presented as far as the residential rates and the commercial rates, I think those look good. The only one question I did have was, it seemed like between the option 1 and option 3, where there's no tiers, it actually looked to me like some of those rates.
Yeah, what class is that,
Uh,
Brian?
Are you
This
talking
was
about
for
commercial?
residential rates, sorry.
Oh, residential.
It seemed like some of those numbers were actually lower with the third option of the uniform rates.
Did you add it up for the whole year or just month by month?
Yeah, because it does actually change.
Yeah, I am not gonna argue. I did not do the breakout and
Yeah.
grab all 12 months and just do the math on it.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were generally lower though, so I was gonna ask what, you know, kind of what the motivation was behind recommending option 1 versus 3 and just.
Yeah, I mean, so what I gathered from option 1 in the tier is to be able to split it out equally, right? Just like trustee Gator said, a family of 8 is gonna pay more than a single individual or somebody, you know, who's, you know, a small family of 2 or 3, you know? So I think, and am I
That's
correct?
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Option 1 captures that essential use, whereas 3 is a uniform. term.
And it also kind of protects that, the lower income set budget per month kind of thing,
Yes.
where
Well,
the
it's a
uniform one.
Yeah, it's exactly what Kaylor said though, and what John and Christine have shared about their own personal family bill.
Got it.
Uses like one person, you know, on disability versus a family of 7, there's no reason they should be paying the same.
Hold on, we're looking at something we can actually tell you exactly why. One of the things, this one is 8, right? So just using supposed numbers, it doesn't add it all the way up, but the average bill across the board is lower when it's just essential use time, not summertime. Which then, if you went with the uniform rate, you're actually charging more to customers who have non-potable systems, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And the first one encourages water conservation if you so choose, but also allows you to have the freedom to pay for more use.
I guess
Individual.
what I was confused about is like, for instance, if you look at the month of June, right? For option 1, for an average user, right, you're looking at 134, whereas option 3, you're looking at 126 for an average user. So that number is actually lower than the tiered rate. Right, and same thing with a high user, it's actually gone down by $20 from 203 to 180, also for the same month of June. So I just
Check across the board though.
Those.
Because January's higher. I mean,
February's higher.
Yeah, so that's what I'm curious about. I'd have to go back and kind of pull all that, and I can do that. I was curious what.
It was more expensive for the low users, I think was, and we wanted to be conscious of those people that don't use a lot of gallons. That's, I think, the reason.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
otherwise you were spreading across that cost across the board on your base rate. And the up to 3,000 gallons was actually higher on the uniform rate, which then essentially penalized the people who don't use very much water.
Makes sense.
Yeah, okay. I'm good with that for now. I'll go back and run a couple of things because I just want to make sure that looks good. The one thing I didn't see in the packet was as far as new development tap fees, it seems like we're not addressing any of that. in this presentation.
You didn't have anything to do with that.
Okay, just want to check on that.
We just like you guys.
One away.
No, and honestly, I think that's all I've got for now. Like I said, I'm very curious to see some real world data behind it and see how that turns out. So.
One of the things that says wondering why essential use is including commercial, so that's one thing. I don't want you to answer it right now, but something to consider. And then the other thing is, if this works as planned and people do a better job of controlling their bills, and they have the control to do it, we will sell less water.
That's
Which,
built into the base rate. Revenue stability is built into the base rate.
right, okay, so I just want to make sure, and I understand that argument, but it's just overall, you know, and it makes sense, of course, that the less water people use, the less money we're making selling water, right? And this is major, this is, you know, how we make money on this utility, so.
But ballpark, what it looked like was that 90% of the users are residents. And they're,
Sure, and
it's
that's not my
gonna go
point, so
down
let
a
me
little bit,
finish this thought.
so then maybe they will use a little bit more.
Okay, so just to finish my thought, it's like, as a consideration, again, when we're choosing those real numbers to build the models, to do the budget, to make the rates. The final thing, I want to make sure that we consider that we're not going to sell as much money, as much water as we have in the past. Ideally, by how much, who
Well,
knows?
technically, I mean, it would give us more opportunity to sell water to the farmers in the system that could lease it. I mean, I guess we're using less, but
That's probably a different.
on topic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so I just want to make sure that's in our head too. So if we just base it and model exactly off usage in the previous year, I don't think that would be accurate. I think we'd come short from expectations. So,
We did
Well,
think
Tom
about that.
kind of
guys-
addressed that because that was a must have, was
So you built
revenue
it in, you
stability.
built it into the base
Yeah.
rate
Yes.
to be able to sustain our system and be able to continue to put money. So we can run the system and maintain the system
You're working backwards from what you need, so
So
what
it
you
really
need to
doesn't
recoup
matter
revenue wise.
at all. How much we're selling because the base rate's covering it.
The
Right,
base rate is.
The base rate with
cost
that capital
of
charge
And
and the rest
capital
of it should recoup the essential
Yeah.
capital that we need to provide budgetary support to the department.
and then.
Okay,
Which requires an annual review.
annual review.
Okay.
So it will
Annual
be
review
perfect
Every single
for the
year.
base rate. Yes, makes sense.
For all of the rates.
You got it.
For with the budget, and it's something that will be reviewed every single year in order to make sure those.
So that make sure we don't fall into what we fell into in 2020,
Yes.
where nothing was adjusted for a long time. Got it.
And you gotta look at it one way too, is that might free up some water for the new developments coming
Yeah.
in, because we have a water shortage.
I mean, you guys looked at this as being proactive, correct?
Right.
Yes.
So,
Does every single one of you care about this town?
Yes.
And we care
Fair
about the
enough.
businesses in the
I
town.
think we've
And
got some
also,
good ideas.
the most,
good.
what would be the fairest is that people pay for just the water that they use. No base rates, anything. You use water, well, the 1,000-gallon price would go up. And then people would end up using less water, which means that we wouldn't make,
You would have
Our
any
money,
revenue
so we-
stability.
we couldn't go with what my libertarian point of view, which is like, this is how the most fair doesn't work, so let's get the most sensible.
Yeah.
So that's-
And so
that's what our
outside of fairness,
To kind of wrap it up,
all of
kind of
that,
wrap it up.
sustainability.
Yes,
What is sustainable for the staff to maintain? to
Right.
Implement, what is sustainable for the customers to pay? What is sustainable for the town to have what we need to continue to operate and not be in a
correct.
poor position?
And this is
So
something you guys came to a
sustainability.
consensus conclusion
We
on.
Yes.
rename.
It was
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
And you're all from different backgrounds.
It was really
Okay.
easy.
Well,
So that's all, that, I mean, now we can move on
Well, can I
to,
say one thing? Rebecca left. When she comes back, can I answer her question as to why we did not include any water in as essential use for businesses?
Yeah, please.
She asked that question and then
I
she
think
said
that'd
again,
be fair.
she wants to know what the answer
If,
is. So when
yes,
she comes
that's
back.
fair.
Okay.
Let's move on to sewer. We got a long night.
Dave didn't get asked.
Oh, did you have another question?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, got it.
All right, sewer is easy.
I
So I'll start with the really great news, which is that at the last meeting, when we looked at sewer rate, which literally took 15 minutes, we realized that the model that Rough Townsend was less than $1 off of the recommended rate that the sewer rate roundtable gave
Wow.
in the fall.
Awesome.
So we did some high fives. Me and Ken and Wyatt, we were very proud that we were that good. So we were very excited. The sewer rate is super easy. Relatively speaking, I messed it all up because I kept looking for answers. Oh, that's right. It's just
They didn't
talking.
really talk about it, there was just the paragraph.
That's right. So these are the ones we chose, these three?
We chose this one for residential multifamily, and then the commercial was separate because of.
Right.
the different
So with the sewer rate for residential and multifamily, irrigation does not have a sewer rate, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, again, you have your base fee, right, which is your cost of delivery, all that, or cost of service and all that kind of stuff. Your volume rate is based off, just like we do now, your average winter consumption. And when it all works out, it's literally within $1 of what we're paying right now. So not bad.
But
at
what
all.
changed?
What changed was we had,
Oh, before it was in.
before that, we had 3,000 gallons included in the base rate,
I know.
so
Right.
that was $30. So then, which is what everybody says right at the moment, 30,
Right.
31. And then the numbers that we had, which might also be imaginary, but maybe not, maybe they're gonna be.
No, I
maybe
think
we
it
have
still
some idea.
includes your
Then-
winter.
Then,
Yes.
yeah, but the new numbers, I mean, they.
The new
they told
numbers
us-
are based on $1,000 per actual monthly water.
Right,
use.
so it
1,000
changed. they-
gallons, sorry.
It's still.
The new one was, there was a base rate, which was lower than the $30.
Yep.
Right.
And then you paid, for each of those 1,000 gallons, but it'll still be figured every month on what your winter time, usage is.
Right,
So it'll be
Still
just
set
around
amount.
3,000. Of course, if you're somebody who lives by themselves in an apartment and
Might be
use
less.
1,000,
Well, I
you'd
mean,
be less.
technically, the sewer in the winter is gonna be the same as the sewer in the summer, because you're not watering the lawn,
Right.
the water on the lawn doesn't count as sewer.
right.
As far as I'm
Pretty
You're
aware.
probably still pooping and like washing your dishes the same
Yeah,
amount.
same,
you know,
same usage, maybe
Right.
more in the,
But
if you
it
have
is-
holidays.
Right?
So when
Who
you
knows?
added the
Maybe
base
that's why we don't
fee to
include
3,000 gallons worth of
But yeah,
water.
it makes sense.
Right.
But-
So with the commercial, it's still a base fee plus 1,000 gallons of actual usage. In part because not every business, maybe some businesses are busier in the
This is
winter.
based off of monthly, not seasonally.
Right,
Perfect.
so there's no average winter consumption for commercial.
Makes sense.
And we're looking at that base rate being based on the type of business you are. Because every business is gonna put a different kind of strain on the system, right? So if you have a little bookstore, your sewer strain is probably next to nothing. But if you have a manufacturing facility or a brewery, what goes in there may be different, and they can have plans for how they clean up spills and all that kind of thing, but
Well, I mean, it says
We need
like
to-
right here, the base would be per bill plus volume charge per 1,000 gallons.
Right.
So it is based off of
So it
usage.
would be, there would still
It's
be a
not gonna be
base
based
fee
off of business.
and the volume.
well,
And then
eventually,
Eventually, they might, depending on how much either toxic stuff or solid stuff was coming from a business and that our sewer plant had to take care of, that would be like a separate charge.
So it will be assessed in the future.
That would, be
Right.
but that might
that's
be
very
something in the
standard.
future, right?
We
And
learned that
that's
other
very-
cities are
right.
doing that with monitoring it, and it's fair. The people that tax the system more should bear the burden of taxing the system.
Was this also a consensus?
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Got it.
it was amazing.
It was.
We did agree on everything. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Maybe we-
That's what happens when you care about the town.
Strategic.
Doesn't matter where you come from.
That's true.
as long as you care.
can I answer that question real quick?
Yeah.
So, and
Trustee-
correct me if
trustee
I'm
did.
wrong, this is for you, Rebecca. You were asking about the lack of essential use within the commercial water rates. Our goal, when we decided we wanted that for the residential, was for literally for life, right? So that a family who's on a limited income, they know this is what I get for that money and I can survive. Commercial, there'd be no way to do that because there's different amounts for different businesses. And we want all the businesses to survive, but our focus was literally on like life in general, if that makes sense. So that a 3-year-old can flush the potty when he's learning to potty train, things like that. And commercial, it's just too diverse and it's a different priority, you know, a different kind of focus. We want them to be able to, that's why they have the big tier. So we want them to have the least amount of impact on their bills in terms of water usage. And so we grew those tiers bigger. That's kind of the equivalent of essential use to residents.
Sure, I understand that. I'm just wondering if it is supposed to be treated the same or, you know, but it's bigger tiers, I understand, but
What is,
that essential use.
And there was one other thing that the tiered, I mean, this is just ballpark, I'm not gonna give real numbers, but thank goodness we had real numbers, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to just philosophically understand this. I had to have numbers. But the tiered rates, so that between 0 and say 25,000 gallons, and even that's probably negotiable. I mean, if they're like, well, you know, there's a bunch of businesses that just use this much, you know, they might go to some different numbers. I mean, but that's the computer people's problem. But
is
anyhow-
Todd still with us?
Yes.
That was a
Can
couple,
I ask Todd a
Okay,
question real quick?
little bit,
Kathy,
yeah, sure.
Todd? Are you there, Todd?
Yes, I am.
So I don't know if you heard, trustee Daly's question, about what they came up with for the, commercial water rate structure. But my question would be, across the board from what you've seen in your experience and being a professional in the field, did the roundtable come up with a option one that makes sense for what you've seen in other municipalities and areas, like ours?
And we're talking about that option 1 tiered structure, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, commercial's a real sticky wicket, because there's just such a large diversity of demand. There are utilities that do have tiered structures, but typically they're by meter size. Now, with the town, you just don't have quite the critical mass of customers that you can separate out by meter size. So what we did was, or what I presented was kind of a compromise of setting the tiers such that about 50% of the bills would be in that first tier. But, you know, Megan brings a good point that there's such a diversity of demand that it's, when you look at a distribution of bills and how much they use, you look at a residential distribution, it's pretty standard, whereas commercial can just vary all over the place. And, but because you have a small amount of customers, maybe it's not quite as diverse, but we typically don't see tiered structures for commercial. If we do, it's usually by meter size. But again, you know, the town's a little unique in that you don't have quite a lot of commercial customers. So maybe that need to break it out by meter size wouldn't be necessary, but it's something to definitely track and see how everyone's water usage falls in the future, because we just looked at a couple of years of data to develop that.
Yeah, and so we'll be assessing this yearly, something that we can address and change if need be, right? This is a great starting point. You guys agree as a roundtable?
There we are then.
Well, and I
There
have
we
one
are.
more question for you. Is that okay? Do you guys mind really quick? Todd, so question with this is I kind of explored surrounding municipalities with us. And I had noticed that some other municipalities actually have additional charges that I'm not seeing in here for a commercial rate structure, such as maintenance of,
For sewer?
well, that's for both. They have additional charges for some areas you have to actually invest in the water and sewer plants. There's a required rate that they require you to invest to assist in
So I
building.
think this would be
This is
would
a
be separate
nice,
from our roundtable,
right,
but it's great,
but
yes.
this is a nice way to look at, we aren't implementing those extra charges. So commercial's not seeing all those additional charges, they're just seeing a different rate structure for both water and sewer that creates equality on all sides of the board. but also makes it to where they're not having those additional charges, so it helps them prepare easier than having large impacts right away. Is that something you've seen in the other municipalities with sewer and water?
Well, obviously every utility is different, but I'm hearing that, some utilities do break out certain costs separately. I know Brighton just started doing that with their wastewater treatment plant. They break out a separate cost, a monthly cost, to show that, hey, we're taking this money in to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant. Regarding the investment into the system and things, typically that type of language is reserved for the tap fees. And sometimes the names of tap fees, like what the town calls them, might be plant investment fees or something. And those are still those one-time charges. There's just a number of names that mean the same thing. So, basically all the communities in Colorado that I've worked for have tap fees or plant investment fees or capacity fees, and they're all the same thing. But yeah, breaking out the bill is becoming a little more popular just because people want to know, well, what is it that I'm getting for this? And I want to understand what portion of my bill is going up. So, but all those rates and the other utilities and municipalities are really designed just to recover their cost as a utility enterprise fund and not be funding anything else, really just recovering the cost to provide service on a daily basis.
Got it. Thank you.
I just want to apologize to the group that my laptop died. I'm looking at the presentation on my phone. So if I look like I am being super rude, I am very engaged. I promise, but I'm using my phone. So I've been, I promise. Okay, I just don't want to look rude. So.
38% from joining you.
I am.
Mayor Shosse, so we've been taking notes of the comments that the trustees have made and the different comments that have been made, so we can address that at the meeting next week. Hopefully that's the plan. So just want to let you know we've been tracking all the information, the dialogue that's happened, and we'll be ready to present that.
Perfect. Thank you guys for your hard work. Thank you for caring about our town. Presenting these options to us and giving us somewhere we can move forward and make sure that we prosper. So I appreciate that. Thank you for everyone of you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Thank you guys. Thank
I
you.
am impressed.
Fun what happens when we cannot come together.
Yes.
I was gonna say, maybe you guys should all do the next strategic planning.
Okay, are we moving right into budget? You want to take a break first?
Yeah, let's take ourselves a 5 minutes. Come back.
Got it.
Okay, budget, the first one we will do is Parks and Recreation. Trustee Gator, do you have any questions?
Give me 1 second when we get to parks.
Got it.
So I did have a question on the revenue, I'll start on the revenue one. And this, I don't know if this is a you question or a,
You're asking charity?
oh. Right there. For the open sales tax, is that held in a restricted fund? Or is that just generally held in that, I think in the revenues, it's line 9. Open space sales tax.
That I'll have to verify on how that's been handled.
Okay,
But, you know, with the way our accounting software system works, it's in one line item that we can watch and manage to monitor.
okay. And then on line 15, we have the transfer in from park impact fees for master plan study and new irrigation, or $80,000. Are those held in a different fund, or what does that mean when we're talking about transfer in?
Impact fees are held separately than
Okay,
regular fund dollars.
got it. Okay, is that something from the, okay. If there's anything else I had on the sheet. On the CIPs, did you want me to just keep going through all of them? Or did you want me to let other people get a chance?
For Parks and Rec,
Yes,
might as well just
okay.
swing them all out.
So on the CIP, there wasn't much there, so just had a question on what we're doing there. So the splash pad chemical room upgrades. If you could just kind of break out what we're doing there and then also the irrigation system upgrades.
Yeah, so I'm not 1000% sure what Dean researched, but to my understanding, it was to upgrade the chemical storage. Right now, it's not ideal. So that would be ideally climate control in there.
Okay.
Right now, the chemicals just sit in the sun and bake,
Oh,
which off gases.
Got
So
it.
they
Okay.
get used faster. So it's just to upgrade that and make it also safer for staff going in
Okay.
and out.
perfect. And then the irrigation, the 25,000 irrigation upgrades.
Yeah, so right now, our irrigation for Library Park is dependent on PSD. So we have to basically, we're at the mercy of when PSD does their irrigation
Okay,
at the same time. And so that is ideally to do upgrades outside of that, specifically just that whole system, because that system's old, but
Okay.
also to separate it so that we don't have to wait for them
got
to
it.
turn on their irrigation to water. So that was an
Got it.
issue we had this year, was they waited longer than we wanted to.
Got it.
And so, yeah.
Right, let me get to the expenses sheet for parts. Oh, that's in the other file. Sorry, 1 second. Got two things going here. Okay. Oh, hold on. That's right, so I'm looking at the one that does not include the question. Somebody else want to go real quick, because I'm looking at the wrong one that doesn't have the answer, things that have already been answered. I don't want to ask. questions.
Any questions on Parks and Rec?
I do not have questions on it. I am extremely grateful. I did send an email. I did take note that I had residents reach out to me and state that they were impressed that our parks were staying mowed this last few months. So that was a huge increase from people I saw complaining in a latter year that they felt that parks weren't being mowed and maintained as well as they should. So I kudos to you guys for getting those and keeping them maintained this year.
Trustee Daly?
I did notice that, I reviewed some of these, I think in the Parks and Rec, advisory board, we got a preview of it. I know things have changed since then. That I thought one of the large things was, additional costs for toilet rentals. Is that still not a concern or question to upgrade, toilets?
If I'm, yeah, so that wasn't increased. And my explanation from Dean on that was that with the transition from Geios to Republic Services, they didn't really adjust much about that.
Okay,
And he was confident that we could work in somehow the ADA bathrooms
out.
without, yeah, too much. And that's also gonna be a slow growing process. We have to build the actual ADA platforms and stuff.
Okay.
So that's something. we can-
well, it's great if we can do that without any significant costs. That's fantastic, so. Fantastic. And just the general feedback of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. There wasn't any significant concerns or questions. It was mostly just questions as to what would be considered expense associated with this versus that. But there wasn't, just to pass along that news from the advisory board, it was a thumbs up of approval from that group. I don't have any other questions for Parks and Rec.
Trustee Regan,
Oh, actually.
what's trustee shoot it out?
So something that was discussed that was really needed, which was in the version we looked at prior to a lot of these changes and some other considerations, was a really need for additional tech for parks, right? Somebody work on irrigation or a lead, excuse me, I don't know the right word. So, but based on what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing that that's included in this, correct?
That is correct.
So that was a very big need, but they have omitted that based on budgetary to be conservative here. So I just want to make sure that's known, but that's not necessarily that they don't need that. It's just that it's been cut. So that's a big loss, I think, to this equipment. A significant loss to acknowledge. Okay, sorry, that was it.
Trustee Regan?
I really have no questions. It's a very diverse budget you got there and, is there any room for, I mean, if we have to cut, is there any room for cutting or is this pretty much base all the way?
Yeah, so one thing you'll kind of notice too is we didn't do a ton of increasing in a lot of lines. And so that's just kind of getting creative, especially with cost of services and
Right.
going up right now. So we are kind of at that point where we're feeling quite comfortable that that's what we can.
We maintain what we got, we need to have that.
Yep, exactly.
And the area that we could afford cuts is more so in the CIP, so we implemented the ones that were top priority and omitted some of those that we had some room to budget in later years.
I don't think so.
Back to.
I am, thank you, Patty. She sent me back the email, I'm like looking for it, and Patty just sent it to me. So let me go through, there's only a couple, because the other ones were answered. There's supposed to increase in office supplies, that's just because we're splitting everything out that used to be in the clerk or somebody else's budget. Okay, perfect. So that one's that. The other ones I wanted to speak to, if you could just clarify to those, it's gonna be the improvements, so that's line 35, the parks, playground, general R&M versus the line 58, which is minor park improvements. Can you just speak to whether they should be, because I know they said they could be combined or they could be kept separate. Could you speak to any reasons why we should have them one way or the other?
Yeah, so right now, the parks, playground and general R&M is really more of our like day-to-day and the really small stuff. So we get like trash bags, dog food waste bags, that kind of stuff, bolts if there's one missing from a playground. And then the other one is really like big repairs. So the new slide that had to be replaced over at Park Meadows.
Got it.
Came out of that one. So that's how we differentiate. using
Okay.
those two.
That makes sense. Perfect. So it does that makes sense to keep those split out. So that makes sense. Check, there was a couple I had in recreation. No, you guys answered, well. No, you guys answered the ones I had in recreation, so I think I'm good on parks and rec. They answered all my questions on the spreadsheet, so. In essence of time, I won't re-ask them, so.
Dominic, do you have anything?
I guess I'm just, as I am a hockey official, I just have the instructor official fees kind of jumped out at me on here, so town ends up paying, is it instructors, is it refs, is it, obviously there's more programming going on this year, but it's kind of snip and jump. I was wondering if there's anything structural that could change about that, or is there any leeway in that budget? It's kind of a question I had.
Yeah, so we contract our referee and all official assigning out to another company. They actually already have low paying for officials, which they're increasing which is deserved for officials. So that's going up on there, and then that's also our instructors, and we've added classes this year. And so that line pays officials and instructors. So,
Nothing further from finance committee.
Perfect. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you.
On to planning. Okay, the next section. Yeah, that was good. Start with, trustee data.
This is the one where you have to decrease office supply.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I honestly don't see any significant concerns or questions. It all looks very straightforward to me. And it's an overall decrease, so I don't see any concerns. Thank you.
Trustee Wiegand.
I agree with her. You know what your budgets are. You know what your expenses are, and looks good, especially with the decrease.
Trustee Mason.
I've got no complaints here. The only one I might have a question about is just the Humane Society holding charges, but I think you guys have provided a fairly decent explanation here. So I mean, yeah, no, I mean, it's a decrease to the budget overall, so I like it.
Trustee Gator.
All right. So I'm just going through. If you could, I mean, you guys answered most of these. The only one I would ask, maybe if you could just kind of speak to a little bit, is on the professional services piece that we, or sorry, there's two. So if you can speak a little bit to the professional services and kind of what types of projects those are that we're paying out for. And then also the line right above it, the reimbursable services. So are these separate from the things that are passed through? Because that's where I just got a little confused. You know, some things we are billed and then we bill the client. Are these separate from that? Or if you could just explain kind of how that works with the reimbursable services.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So they are two separate line item accounts purposefully. The reimbursable services are the ones that if we have to hire specialized services, and a great example is a traffic impact study. We contract with a traffic engineer, or PTOE, to do that study analysis for us, and they bill the town. We pay that contractor, and then we turn around and we invoice the specific development for the costs incurred for their development. So that is a pass-through. It's $40,000. Sometimes we don't use all of it. Sometimes we use more of it. It's a one-to-one.
Okay,
So any costs incurred to the town in this account is a direct one-to-one.
got it. Okay,
The following line item for professional services are things that the town might need to contract for something that is a specialized service that we don't have in-house that's not reimbursable to a developer. And there's a few things in there, GIS capabilities. We don't have that function in-house right now. We're trying to build that capacity, but we don't have it currently. We may have to contract for some of those services, specialized mailings, some water rights council, some things of that nature may all fall into that category. We obviously try to use less than $30,000 if we can. So we try to have something there if we need it, and we only use it if we have to.
I'm good.
I don't have anything. I just want to say thank you for breaking out the professional development operations. It makes it easier to understand where some of those extra investments are going to. So I appreciated seeing that.
Can you walk me through the decrease in building inspection fees? That was one item. I was just having a hard time wrapping my mind around the decrease, and I know decreases are good, and I'm not upset about it. I'm just walking through logic and making sure it kind of sounds.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and thanks for the question. The building inspection fees are what we pay Safe Build. This is a third-party contractor that does our building plan review and inspection services. We don't have enough staff to do all that work in-house. So we contract for that. We collect a permit fee that's charged at the time the permit is obtained, and Safe Build is paid a portion of that fee. That's what this number is the portion that is paid to Safe Build. It's decreasing because over the last couple of years, we've had to limit the number of new residential permits that we could issue to stay within our capacity for the water and wastewater treatment capacities. And so because of that reduction, the number of permits that we can allow, we're reducing the corresponding revenue and expenditure for that line.
Okay, so we backed into it, right? Like we expected a 15% decreased it 15% here, and then there's an offsetting revenue line somewhere, right? Because we're paying a port, like, we're taking in
Yes.
building permit fees, paying a portion of it to save bill. Those percentage, like change that kind of lines up with
The-
expectation.
The corresponding revenue line is adjusted also. Yes.
That's it for me.
You're welcome. Thanks for the questions.
On to cemetery. Any questions, trustee Peaks?
I do have a question on this, because I remember sitting through a trustee meeting this last year where it was requested that a survey be done for the cemetery to, it was my understanding there was some flooding there and damage done to some of the grave sites. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do we know why? Are we gonna plan on doing that?
Be carried over into
Yep.
2023
So-
according to our packet.
So it's unspent money in 2022, we just take that budgeted expense and roll it into 2023. So that's why it's not added to the 23 budget, because it was already budgeted in 20.
Got it. Are we going to be completing that in 2022?
No, will not be completed in 22. It'll be rolled over in 2023 according to the packet.
Did you say flooding?
So there was something that trustee McDonald had brought up that she would have liked to have seen something done. There was damage. I don't know if it was flooding, something, but there had been reported some kind of damage done to the cemetery out there. Was it, do you know the damage that they speak
I'm not
of?
aware of any flooding. I probably would have heard about that.
Okay.
We do have kind of miscellaneous repairs, the flags get torn up off the wind and things like that. The survey number was really originally initiated because we didn't have enough corners, those are all platted plots out there, right? And we basically measure off of property corners of those blocks to find where to inter somebody. And we had lost a lot of those over time. So most of that survey work was about reestablishing those corners, making sure that everybody was in the right spot and that kind of thing. We also looked at creating additional plots out there. And that's work is about halfway done. So we could kind of move forward with that. And that would need to just go through the planning process for that to happen.
But that was my only question on that.
Trustee Gator.
No, my two questions I had were both answered in the Excel document, so I'm good.
Trustee Gator.
I don't have any questions. That's
No
very simple.
questions.
Easy one.
Thank you. On to the clerk. Start with trustee Wiegand.
I really don't have any questions on this. I think you guys have put together a good budget so far, and like I said, hopefully you know what you're spending, being cost efficient with it, and this is my first time around, so pass to the next.
Trustee Daly.
I do have some questions for election budget. Based on some of the initiatives. Potentially, we likely will have to have an election of some sort this next year.
I think the decision was made that because it's technically not an election year, we're not going to budget election.
Okay.
In terms of trying to be mindful of our expenses. If it does happen,
then we're gonna have to internally address that.
Would be coming to the Board of Trustees with a
Or an
request for that expense.
So, because essentially right now, there is no guaranteed need at this moment.
Correct.
So it would be, I guess, frivolous kind of to budget it. Okay. Thank you. That was explanation I need. And then the other thing that was a big change, it looks like a big change anyway, for 365% are those dues and subscriptions, which we talked about previously, which are important memberships for us to be part of. And you know, it says 365%, it was not a significant amount of money. So that's the other one I wanted. I got, that's good though. Just the election was my major concern.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the finance committee had some good back and forth on whether or not the election kind of makes sense. There, you argue both ways, right? Depending on your philosophy of budgeting. That's kind of where we landed to, was that given that there's not one
For
concrete
sure, yeah.
calendar yet, just kind of makes sense to deal with it on a needed basis. But we did talk about that. We talked about the dues and just got kind of the rundown on what was what and whether or not everything was necessary. So we did talk about both of those.
Perfect. Yeah, and I agree. I think that's complete sense.
Did you have any questions?
No, nothing for
Trustee Davis?
Yes, so I know we'd asked if we could get a breakdown on what the dues and subscriptions and what was new from 21, because and I don't know if you guys were able to get that, so you did give like some breakdowns. You said CMCA is 138.
I worked on this and I'm looking for my document that I did,
I was
because
just,
I reduced it quite a bit, so
okay,
ended up with CMCA times 2, so in case there, for the clerk and the deputy, potentially deputy clerk, and IMC is the 175, and then ARMA for the 200, and that was all that should be in that dues and subscriptions.
so I was just curious how we got to the 4,000, because
I have no idea. That was, Crystal did that
Okay.
before she left, and there may have been, I don't know.
Okay,
I
so-
couldn't find any notes, so,
Adjust that.
yeah.
Perfect. If you guys can just figure that out, I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with it if we need it.
Yeah.
I was looking at $138 and $200. Like, how does
No.
that add up to 4,000?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's,
perfect.
I cleaned it up. I can't find the document. I'm sorry.
Yeah. In professional development, I appreciate you guys breaking out what conferences and who was attending, so much appreciated. And I also appreciate the answer on the update to the code review and why that was in there. So my questions were all answered on that. Just the only one you can get back to us on is just the breakdown of that and then wherever it needs to be.
You bet.
Good. Trustee Gator?
I'm good.
Yes, sir. And Trustee Teets?
I'm good.
Trustee Mason?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Next one will be finance. Start with Trustee Teets.
I don't have any questions in this section.
Perfect.
I have nothing written.
Trustee Gator.
All right, you guys, just put the office supplies, that's the same, right? We're just breaking that out to each department. Perfect, okay. Questions about professional development, so that's good. Could you just kind of give a little bit more explanation? You did answer in the Excel document, just on the insurance and bonds, just kind of how that works with the sharing pool or,
So SRSA is technically stands for Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Association. So your rates are based off of your liability and how much you weigh down the rest of the members in the pool. So once we get our paperwork audit done where we can show that we attained the proper professional development, we, you know, got the certifications we need, internal just structures, things like that, that will reduce our premiums. How many claims we have will affect that. So, you know, our immediate hail claim would really help our situation. So it's kind of a yearly thing that we work with our representatives at SRSA. They come out, they do yearly audits with us, make sure that we're in compliance and all.
aspects internally, externally, and then they'll assess how much we owe for our dues.
You know, second. And then I did have a question about the county treasurer's fee. I know you mentioned in there, we don't really have information, yet we do have it doubling. And I was curious what drives that, or
I think that was a best guess estimate based off of what was budgeted in 2022, because we will not have that data until we present the final budget.
okay. Got it. Okay, so once we get to the final budget, you will be able to nail that down and have,
Hopefully,
okay,
Once-
okay.
it's the county.
It's the
We're-
county,
We're at the
okay.
mercy for that line
Okay.
item, so, that one we just budgeted conservatively.
Okay. Perfect. The other one is the hardship utility grant. I know we had talked about potentially improving that. And this goes back to the legislative budget as well. Whether it's now or at a future budget meeting, we had a very good presentation from Charity to the Finance Committee yesterday about kind of where things are at for first quarter of this year. Very enlightening. And I really think that we need to look at, okay, what are the things that we as elected officials have control over, things like our outreach fund, things like our whatever the other one's called. My brain is
Or
just
discretionary.
thank you. And then also we talked about, should we fund more in the utility grant? Really looking at where can we help to kind of bring the budget down, because we don't know what's gonna happen with the economy, but our budget's in, it's potentially, we're Charity's still working through documents and stuff like that, but probably gonna be in a pretty tight spot. And so I know we talked about potentially increasing that. Coming out of the meeting yesterday, kind of a lot of the discussion with the finance committee was, okay, what do we look at? Obviously staff's already trimmed the budget incredibly well, but also what are ways that things, they haven't touched the things that we as elected officials oversee. So the HUD grant is one of those discretionary funds. And I think that we really need to look at what can we do to kind of knock those down as much as we can to give some relief to the budget. And then obviously you can talk to Charity more if you've got additional questions on that. She can, I'm sure, fill you in and show you kind of what she went through with us, but I think it's
I think
something we need to.
we're already kind of working on that to be able to bring to the table.
Do we know how much we've had in requests for the hardship utility grant to date? Like
I
a
would have to
ballpark?
look, because I know that we have spent over in that line item year to date. And I can email that information to you after the meeting, once I can pull that up. We have had a couple requests that have come in that have been denied, and we have referred them to county resources.
And I'd like to, if at all possible, and the board agrees with it, this is one headed into the
Oh, yeah.
the fall that I would really dislike cutting from this. That's one thing I will say is I
Wait,
know
cutting from what?
I don't, to not increase this hardship utility grant heading into, since we've already went over. I just,
Or we could take funds from something else.
yes, and allocate
increase.
to, yes, that's kind of what I would prefer to see in this category,
Yeah.
just heading
Okay.
into the holidays and
I think
struggles
we're-
with families.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Finance committee called that out as well, just with actuals and just as best we can, trying to line it up with.
Yeah,
expected
what we've
usage,
actually
and that,
used.
decisions have to be made right, but if at all possible, like trying not to back off, at least based on last year's actuals.
Yeah.
At a minimum.
Yeah.
So we called that out as well.
Anything further?
I just had a question on the clerk really quick. I'm sorry, I skipped over my one question that I had. I know that there was a discussion that I had. I know core requests are a huge thing. And something that I don't know, Patty, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but something that seems to be a challenge is the amount of hours invested in chasing down paper documents, things that you're trying to identify when people are requesting the quoras. I know that I had asked you if there was a software that was available to take everything digital. So we're not chasing down and having staff invest so much time, because at the end of the day, that time is money to our staff. Did we do anything?
So we did, last year, the Board of Trustees budgeted money, and I can't remember the name of the software, to start moving everything into an electronic format, like a records management system. It has been purchased. We haven't had a chance to work on it yet. The trick is not so much tracking everything down, but finding the time to be able to scan it and put it into the folders and things like that. What I'm thinking about doing is working with the high school a little bit, something I did when I was in Windsor. We'd bring on like an intern, and they come and work in the clerk's office, and they could scan, they could do utility billing, they could sit at the front desk, but it was just a great opportunity for them to get some business expertise while they're still in high school. It is a program that the school does have, but I'm going to give them a little time to get on board before I start tapping into that, but thinking that that would be a great use of a student to come in and start scanning our documents for us.
Got it. If we don't have a backup, is there a plan for that backup?
As far as to get the document scanned,
Yes.
it would take an additional person.
Sure.
And I would hate to hire someone just to do that. I'm hoping as things settle down, we get fully staffed with our clerk department and things like that, that we'll have some time to start doing some of that scanning. I would hesitate to hire someone just to do that. And I've looked into outsourcing it. It is fairly pricey to outsource that. So we'll see what we can do internally.
Will we need extra data storage to support that, you think?
No, it's cloud-based.
Okay, great.
Thank you for the question.
That was it.
Perfect. Okay, back to finance. Trustee Daly.
I'm also, regarding the HUD grant, I don't want that to go away anymore, but I'm curious why it's within the finance budget versus maybe utility budget or discretionary fund. I think maybe where. it would be. Or is-
Good question. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
And I'm not really at a place where we can start reorganizing the
Okay.
budget.
Good.
So that's why I left it there.
I feel like it's a
Just
good
for-
question then if you want the same question. Yeah.
It's a very good question.
Okay.
Hopefully, when we have more time to analyze our budget and years moving forward, we're gonna do some reorganization, we're gonna do some cleanup on how our budget is structured.
Sure.
But because of the timing of when I started
Oh.
and when the budget is due, we're kind of just leaving things as is for now.
That's a good enough reason for me so that it's completely acceptable. I'm not with that. But I was just curious if it should be or would be allocated somewhere else, but good thing for the future to consider.
Something else to consider, if these are general fund dollars we're using as a donation type, we can't really budget it out of enterprise system.
Okay, that makes sense too. I had a question about that too. And then my other, I just lost it. A good one too. Two good questions. Oh, so that one is noted, of course, as a policy question. Is there anything else that is policy related that you want our feedback on?
I think in years to come, there will be a lot more of those.
Sounds good.
Right now, we're trying to give you the stripped down, highest functioning operational budget we can provide.
Oh, perfect. I love it. Thank you so much.
Do you have any questions? Trustee Reed?
I like what she just said. She gave us a stripped down one, and that's what we gotta do right now.
Yeah.
So a couple years, hopefully it's gonna be loosened up a little bit, so we have more discretionary funds at that point.
That's my goal.
And then trustee.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, thank you. To general buildings. Trustee Daly,
I got nothing.
trustee
you.
Wiegand,
Nothing.
trustee Mason. Trustee Teets.
No, just the increase in the 20.8%, that's just because the utility rates in general have increased. Yeah, so that was the only thing that I was looking at, is that was noted. Is this taking into account the new structure that they have proposed, where you're gonna see 3 different tiers per day?
Well, so that's our electric bill that's gone up, so that we're just budgeting for inflation.
Got it. Nope, that's it.
Trustee Gator?
No, no, nothing.
No, I just want to make sure the right inflation numbers were baked in. It sounds like it is. It's a little bit of use, it's additional usage plus inflation.
On to IT. Start with trustee Mason.
Let's go ahead and skip me for a minute here.
Okay. Trustee Regan.
No questions. IT's out of my category.
Trustee Daly.
I got nothing either. Happy to see professional development. And there's nothing else there. But the question I had immediately following the question earlier is whether or not we might need to upgrade our cloud-based data capacity, if that ever might approach, if we are storing so many documents. So I don't think that's something we would consider here, but I think that's something for the future, that there's significant, I mean, we just talked to LCSO and the very significant costs that they have for storing
Further
data,
videos.
yeah, for video or other documents. So I think that's something we should always have in the back of our head, might be a significant cost in the future, our working data sets. It kicks my butt all the time.
Questions?
I'm probably stealing trustee Gator's question, but did we ever figure out what was going on with the phone charges and make sure that increase made sense?
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research, so I'm very new to supervising IT and understanding this budget. But I was looking through our different, where all these costs are coming from, but it does include all of the landlines. So across all of our different locations, it includes all cell phones for town staff and also Jive Communications, which helps with our phone tree. So when you call in, you can get to the right spot. It is on our list, on me and our IT specialists, to really figure out who actually needs a landline next year. So it's something I'm hoping we could see a reduce in the future, since we are going towards more and more cell phones, to see if it is an expense we could review in the year of 2023 to prepare for 2024.
On that note, and this is what I used to do for a living, is handle accounts like the towns. Have we done an audit on all the cell phones and making sure that because a lot of times you are on certain plans and either you've got too much, you've got more than you need, or you don't have as much as you need, and then you end up getting charged overages. And a lot of times businesses just tend to overlook it because it's $500 here or $500 there. I know $5,500 a month roughly is, if you add that out to, and I understand that includes landline and other stuff, but have we done that yet? Or do we even know like who our account manager is for our cellular account?
That actually is something that happened this year. We worked with Verizon and we did find that there were some numbers that weren't being used that we had still that we were paying for. So we've gotten into a better system to be tracking our actual cell phones, see which ones are up for upgrades, and make sure that all of our numbers are active within our town staff.
Okay, and they've reviewed the plans as well to make sure you guys are on the right plans for that as well.
I can check on that
Okay.
because I'm not certain there, but I do know we've reviewed
Okay,
what we're using.
and then I just double check too to see if they have you guys on commercial or government or residential plans, because depending on how the phone account was set up, if you're not working with the right person, they won't put you on the right plans because they won't get paid if they put you on the right plan. So if just double check on that. Maybe it's all set and good. It just did seem a little high, but that just might be the reality of it.
On Verizon, I mean, they were in a government deal, right, where you get discounted rate, or at least they did when I was a first responder.
It depends. I mean, rates have changed. I mean, I haven't worked for Verizon in 4 or 5 years, so it's obviously changed in 5 years. They had different rate plans, and so sometimes it was cheaper. It wasn't like it was a massive, and if you were in the right area of government, they would have sometimes discounts available for that. So it just depends on, and that's typically what they'll have is they'll have like an account manager who oversees government accounts, and they'll have like the really big people, and they'll have someone who handles the smaller accounts. And if you actually get in contact with that person who handles the government accounts, they'll typically be able to get you through and say, okay, hey, yes, we have this set up, or we don't, or, oh, hey, no, this is actually a better plan for us to put you on, and we can get you this discount, and they will do a good job at working with that. So if we,
Worth looking into.
yeah,
Thank you.
Anything else, trustee Gator?
the network admin, did we figure out what that was for? Because I know I'd asked about that and we didn't know what it was for last week.
I still haven't figured out what this is for. This was set up prior to me
Okay,
looking at this budget, so we're still trying to figure out what it's for. And if it is something that we're not gonna use, we'll take it back out.
Perfect.
Mhm.
we did the license audit already, it looks like on licenses. I think that's it. All other questions are all answered on the spreadsheets.
Thank you. Trustee Pete's.
He asked 3 questions that I had when I was looking over this. Other than that, honestly, I would prefer to defer to Brian on this one. I think that this is more up his alley.
I would say the same thing as trustee Gator, as far as the telephone services go. That number for 60 employees is incredibly high. And I realize that we've got landlines running places too, but even with, if you're doing $100 a month, it's 60 employees, we're talking about $6,000 plus landlines. I'd figure that's probably only another 10th. So I'm convinced that number is probably twice what it needs to be, but we can figure that out later. The website maintenance, $12,000 a year. Can you help me understand what that is exactly?
So we did a little bit of research into that as well. So our website is Civic Plus. So they have the platform, they have ongoing tech supports, there are different pieces. We do use that website. It holds our minutes, our packets, it holds a lot of information. So it isn't a website that we could just do.
So I understand that
Or smaller.
they're probably hosting it for us presumably, but we're, I would presume for the most part, managing the content that's on it. So without going too much into it, that's probably too much to be paying for somebody to host a website.
I'm wondering, Brian, if it's, sorry, trustee Mason, I'm wondering if it's more of a licensing for Civic Plus.
And that could be.
That, because that would make more money in that amount
Yeah.
than it is. And if that's the case, maybe website licenses, just a better title would be more,
Yes.
better explanation.
Or just moved into the software license and
Yeah.
support.
License.
Civic Plus is made specifically for governmental organizations and municipalities across the country use them specifically for this. That's why they do so well because everybody uses them. So I do think it is that licensing piece.
Yeah, and our website's so much better than it used to be. Thanks. So,
Yes.
but I think it's licensing.
Yep,
Okay,
that makes a lot of
okay.
sense. We'll double check that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I think that's all I've got, really, as far as that goes.
Oh, do you hand up?
No. it's great.
Okay,
You're good.
Cool. We'll stop there. Judicial. Start with, trustee Peter.
Come back to my room.
Trustee Weeder.
Come back to me too.
You
Trustee
the
Nate?
page real quick.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't-
Yeah.
page
I'm not-
22.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
Page 20.
We didn't put it in the because we addressed this in the last session.
Did we?
Oh, yeah, this was in our last week.
Okay.
I just didn't put a check
I'm
mark.
not-
Oh, my goodness, gotta find that, guys. Okay,
moving
right.
on.
Revenues and CIP. All clearly correct? Let me know when.
Just gotta switch back to the other, wrong other spreadsheet. Like 3 spreadsheets going. the general fund revenue and CIP.
Mhm.
Do you want to have questions?
No, that didn't get, no, that didn't.
What's that?
That should be page 35.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh,
yes.
there it is. I did have a question on the revenues.
Mhm.
The LCSO admin, what is that in revenue? We have under revenues, we have LCSO admin, it's right, line
116.
16 for 1,500.
So that was labeled out of our express bill pay, but those are the revenues that we get from court fees.
Got it, okay.
So that's how it's labeled as we receive them in express bill pay, and that's why it's confusing, but those are our court fines, fees, and forfeitures.
I was wondering if that's what it was, but I was like, I don't see it. No. That pays for like that much of your budget. All right. It's no accusations of us trying to find the town into stability here.
Which is not always a bad.
No, I think I like it. So.
That's speeding tickets too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how I can talk myself into the 20 mile an hour. There you go. I'm just doing my part. Keep an eye on Nick. Good for you.
Okay, so just kind of looking at the revenues, so this is on line 30, or
Yeah. 30.
sorry, right before line 30, line 29, less operating costs are greatly appreciated. So all of our general fund basically expenditures come in at about 30,000 under our projected revenues, so that's good. And then we have roughly 205 in CIP, so that basically puts us spending about 175,598 out of fund balance. So I'm going back to my earlier comment, I think we need to really look into whether that's holding things off on the CIP, or again, we can maybe make some cuts to the legislative budget, and that's our discretionary and our outreach. Those are right there. We could come up with actually quite a bit of that if we cut in those areas, so that we're, at least if we can just get to where we're with the CIPs, that we're not spending out of fund balance. The two other things for the CIP projects, the downtown master plan, it's only 25,000, but again, that would help if we can just really, I think we could look at trying to make 23 a pause year, because I know we're working on getting the financials and everything up to speed and understanding exactly where we're at. That I really think it would be wise for us to just say, okay, if we can hit a pause on this, let's see where we're at. And if we find out, hey, we're in good shape and we've got more money, we can always come back and do an amendment and add some of those things back in. Could we get a little more clarification on the ADA lift? I know we're working on getting just the town in general more ADA compliant. Could you walk us through a little bit with that lift?
It's required.
Okay,
Have to have it,
got
being
it.
a public building.
There we go. That's all I needed.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful it's planned for, so thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
And then on line 48, sorry, did you want me to let someone else go? I just like.
No,
No, no, no.
You're-
Roll with it, roll with it.
Okay, that's the housing needs. I'm thinking this is the grant we just got approval for. Is that this number here? The one that you guys are pursuing the grant for?
Yes, that's
Okay.
this budget amount, and that's the full budget
The
amount.
full budget
because
amount,
the
okay,
Grant, if we're successful, is a reimbursement.
is a reimbursement, and so it would be like the 20,
Kind of 20 years.
25%? or
25%.
25% matching. Okay, so if we get the grant, it'll be 25%. So then the follow-up question, if we do not get the grant, do we, no, I understand, do we still have to do it, or can we hit the pause button on that if we do not successfully get the grant?
I think it's a policy decision. There's absolutely value in going
Sure.
through that effort and getting that information done. But if it's something that needs to wait until the following year,
Okay,
to
we can
stay
make
within
that
budget,
call
that's a policy
once we find
decision.
out, okay.
Absolutely.
And that was just something I think it's fine to leave on there, but I think from a policy standpoint, again, looking at the finances. If we get the grant, awesome, we take advantage of the grant, move forward with it, but if we don't get the grant, I think it's something that we should really, again, depending on where we get to, we probably need to say. From my perspective, we need to look at water plant, sewer plant, vital things that we have to do. And try not to spend a dime more than that than we have to, so that if things in the economy go south, we're setting ourselves up to be in a good position. And then tract F, the 75,000, I know I think you guys have said that's the final payment on that. The concern that I have is, are we signing off on that? Because the first large rainstorm we had, it went right back to what it was.
So just this is programmed in this budget year because
Okay.
that's what the contractual agreement that
Okay.
the developer is.
Okay.
There's other provisions in that agreement that if it's not performing the way it's intended or we haven't accepted it, we wouldn't make the final payment. So
Okay.
we're budgeting it in the
Okay.
timeframe in which the agreement said. If it needs to be extended because of other complicating circumstances, we will address that at the time.
Okay, and are we still going through process with that, or has that been accepted and finalized at this point?
This $75,000 has not been accepted.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that we did
Right,
not, because, okay, great.
Those
fantastic.
issues are still pending.
Okay, great. And then with the 20,000 for ADA community improvements, is that just a best guess as to what we potentially would need? Do we have anything behind those numbers there?
It's just a general, it's $20,000 every year we would be budgeting
Okay.
for those improvements. We don't have any data behind
Okay.
it. Just knowing that we need to get caught up, we
Yep.
felt like that was a good
Okay.
number to start with.
Yeah, so those are good. Just again, with the housing needs, if we don't get the grant, I think we need to hold on that. I think we should hold on the master plan. I would like to see us get to a point where we are not spending out of fund balance in the general fund. And again.
Well, the master plan
legislative
still
fund,
wouldn't be till late 2024. I
That's,
think you're just preemptively budgeting for it. Is that my understanding? Am I off base?
Again, I think this is a policy discussion. The downtown master plan has been in the CIP for a number of years and it's slid for a number of reasons. What we had proposed here was kind of splitting that funding over multiple years because we know it's not going to be, if we start in fall of 23, we're not going to complete it in fall of 23.
Yeah.
So there's certainly some consideration that can be given to that timing.
Okay. Perfect. Good ones. Yeah. Did I start with you?
I just started myself, so
Are you still going?
I'm done. I'm done.
Okay.
I got through it. all.
Perfect, perfect. Trustee Teets?
Yes, so it just mainly stems off of some of the questions that John had asked. Sorry, trustee Gator. I gotta get better at that. So curiosity comes in the housing needs assessment and strategy development. If that 70,000, of course, we don't earn that and we don't take or choose not to take that. My concern is we will have people saying who in their right mind refuses to do one of these housing need assessment and strategic development studies if they have a chance to figure out how to do affordable housing. So that's one of my worries in that one. I do think that,
Wait, are you worried about us possibly making a policy on that? Is that what you're talking about?
yes,
Okay. Yeah, that's something that we can discuss if
Got
things
it.
fall through.
okay. Perfect. So, and then.
Valid concern.
So the not performing needs to be expended. So this is that discussion on the retention area. Is that
Tract
the
F?
discussion? Yes, this tract F, is it drainage of a specific retention area in town?
You're asking about the budgetary question
Yes,
or the design and performance question?
so the design performance question.
Okay, so that's not on the agenda tonight. I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about under the budget circumstances.
We need to, basically, we're talking about dollars, like, so, Gator's like, well, if we paid this yet, is this contractual? We can, right?
Got it. I'm just trying to verify if this is the tract that held E. coli this summer. And if this is something that
Oh,
is
you're just
health and,
trying to identify where the project is.
correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No, you're
Okay.
fine. I don't ask questions in the best way possible,
Right.
so,
But, well, thanks for helping me understand. So it is it's the town-owned stormwater detention pond along the frontage road in the south end of town.
got it. So is this something we can avoid for health and safety related issues?
So I think
Well,
that's also related.
Okay,
And that's what Cody was
perfect.
saying is that the contract requires us
Okay.
to,
So that's
pay
why I was
that
asking.
this
do
year.
we Not,
but we don't pay that final 75,000 until staff has signed off and said, this is performing the way that it needs to be. And I think what we kind of saw with that rainstorm is it didn't seem, I don't know where it fell, but.
And
at least it opens
it's still in the
possibility.
warranty
It's still in the-
period, so
Okay.
the contractor would still have an opportunity to
Great.
go in and perform maintenance repairs and other things. And
Perfect.
Those are
That was my
questions that are a little
question.
bit, okay.
at the end of it was, are we gonna be forced to fix it if it's not being fixed
So that's
on
also,
that end?
yeah, that's also not budget.
Well, it kind of is budget if it's an expensive cost that's gonna become.
No, right.
So that was
If
my question.
If there are any other future cost considerations, the board would present with information to make
Got
budgetary
it.
decisions.
Got it. And the $20,000 for ADA, my question comes is in CIP projects, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to fill a CIP project to the 100% mark before you can expend the funds, or can you expend the funds as necessary through? Okay, perfect. That was just my question. So if things come up along the way.
We can just,
Perfect.
that's what the 20,000's for.
And will we still be allocating the regular funds for like special event planning and items like that? I know we had discussed,
I think we went over that in the budgets last week.
but we didn't assign a line item to it, is what I had understood. Did we figure out where that item might be going?
Are you talking about the CAC funds?
Well, no, just the town, because the CAC is kind of, the town has taken over the ADA planning because it's more than just the CAC that
Mhm.
plans events.
Mhm.
So we were looking for the line item listed that covers the budgetary needs for those events all over town.
We'll track that down and get that to you
Perfect.
guys.
Got it.
Sound good?
Yep,
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
that's it.
Christie Mason.
No, I think everything's been answered.
Yeah, same thing.
Scared.
I, just. Not quite sure. Oh, anyway, I'm just gonna talk through this real quick. So regarding the downtown master plan. If we. Of course, I'm in favor of making sure that portion is included within the next year, because if we're doing all the improvements, maybe. Not coordinating with their long-term plan. So I think that's really important to make sure that we're including within the next year for downtown master plan. The other thing that we did include in our strategic plan, but is not included in CIP projects, is the parks master plan. So we did designate that as a major priority. And I understand, how things are right now, but I do want to acknowledge that is something missing from our strategic plan. So if it were not to be included in this next year, I would say that it is a priority that has to happen in the following year in completion. And the sad news that we didn't get that matching grant, maybe would give us an opportunity to look for that again, to be able to get those additional funds in that following year, or another round of attempting for the GOCO grants. The other question I have is, do we really want to charge late fees of library? That's pretty consistently not done anymore across the country.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's no late fees. So I'm wondering, it's a very small amount of income that we get from it, $1,500. And then the way it works right now, it's, in my mind, it's kind of like the free, or like it's a lunch conversation for kids at school. Like schools will always feed your kid. Like regardless they have money or not, they'll always feed their kid. But it's this really awkward thing every single time they come up in line to say, hey, you don't have any money, or you're over, you have this huge balance. We're still gonna feed you, but let me talk to you about that. And that's sucks. So, I mean, I would, and I know that there's like a $5 policy right now at the library, like they try to keep your. And the reason I know that is we're at $5.25, so that's why I'm so there. They're like, hey, do you have a quarter on you? I was like, no, I don't. They're like, we'll make an exception. I'll let you check out some new books. And it's almost like a frivolous, like a weird thing. And the staff kind of like what I got was they were kind of embarrassed to ask for money for late fees. So I wanted to put that, I feel like.
So
that's
that'd
a
be
little
something we can
discussion.
bring when we have our library board.
Sounds good.
Yeah, whether or not we want, it's $1,500 of revenue in here, so.
And if you pay for books and don't get returned in
Right,
the future.
yeah.
it's responsible. So yeah, definitely we're talking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I'm pretty sure. That's all I have.
Yeah.
I'm good. I don't mind paying library fees, but I get it. I just remember.
All right, we're on to Public Works budget, operating budget.
Get that.
Okay, maybe I won't even try to help mess it up.
Okay.
It's like something helping. I'll pull it out from under. Yeah. No, sure.
Are those the tickets?
I think
Ashley texted me and said to make sure to get the ticket.
There's 2 tickets I think you can get off of that.
because you're a business class investor.
Right.
Okay, they're probably just associated with the business.
So however you wanna handle that with
So if you
Ashley.
need my name and anything, just let me know. Okay.
Sorry.
We're like, hi, I'm Dave.
Okay.
I'm Dave's plus one.
Nice.
Y'all set up. Mom.
Ready.
Look at us.
Trustee David.
I need a moment, sorry.
Who doesn't need a moment?
Trustee Gainer.
Did you guys did Patty send you my questions?
We got those.
Awesome. So for the FTE, how many FTE do we have for this included in this? Yes.
13.5.
What's kind of the breakdown on that?
That's management, I guess you'd say, Megan and I. The engineering group and the streets group. We have one group that handles streets, facilities, fleet, drainage, maintenance and things like that. All that's in PW.
Okay, perfect. And then what the budgeted amount, I noticed that was missing for the benefits, the total, it had like the breakout for each fund, but didn't have the total up there. I don't know if that was just left out or.
We're not going to be getting benefits in public works.
No benefits. Oh, well, I know we're billing all the other departments for it, but we're not giving you the money to buy.
So the total amount is in the notes.
Oh, got it. Okay. It just wasn't over in the other one. Got it.
But however, they're gonna be broken out for our direct stuff now.
Got it. Thank you. So the fuel, oil and grease line 19, there is a pretty significant jump from 2021 to 2022. And now obviously 23 to 22 is flat, but could you just walk us through why we had that jump?
Well, the 2022 budget was 18.
Mhm.
We're budgeting 18 this year. And I think the number you're looking at there, the 2021 actual, I'm not sure that we could say that that's 100% accurate number quite yet.
Sure, no, I understand that we're still trying to work through that. I just,
Yeah.
even if it's
so-
off by 100%, that puts us at about $5,000. Even if it was double what we have there.
I honestly can't really answer that question.
Okay.
So I think it's my understanding that when the 2021 budget was created, instead of taking it across all of the funds, they funneled it into one line item to track expenses easier. So this
Okay.
is another one of those cleanup items and
Okay.
restructuring issues
Got it.
for the
Okay.
budget next year, where we're going to identify the different fleets for each
Got it.
fund
Okay.
and separate
And
that
separate
back out.
Okay. Got it.
Will we have a good 2022 actuals number then we can use? For
If we have a 2022 actuals, then we can actually look at the invoices and identify what costs were to what fleet vehicle and then budget from there accordingly.
The other question I had is line 22 HOA fees. This kind of came up in our meeting on Tuesday that apparently we hadn't been paying HOA fees for one HOA. So I didn't know if this includes all HOAs the town is a part of. Is this some HOAs?
This is something I'm still looking at.
We're still looking into that.
I can tell you that the one that we paid out of here forever is for the Knolls.
Okay, got it.
We do own property in the Knolls. It's the
Okay.
disc golf course. in there.
I hope I didn't open a can of worms.
It's
I would
something
have
that
brought it
we
up
need
if
to
you
get
didn't,
squared
so
away.
just know that.
Okay.
they
So
would
this
bring you
portion of
a
Public
high-
Works is just the this is just the Knowles HOA.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
got it.
it is.
Perfect. All right, professional services, so just was wondering, I wanted, first to say, I appreciate we had the decrease from the 2022 budget. Just was curious what the increase was going from 2021, roughly 30,000, still seeing a jump to 40,000.
Yeah, but again, I'm not always that comfortable with the actuals, but
Sure.
we did reduce that. And the nature of this professional services, and might as well just get right to this. There's emerging things that we'll need to take care of next year. We just don't know.
Okay.
Right, and a lot of times these are, I want to say emergency type things, but things that we frankly didn't plan on. I'll give you a perfect example. The Raftellus, great study.
Okay.
And the defeasement, who none of us saw that coming, came out of the water professional services. Well, if we didn't have that, we would have had to come to you and ask for a budget amendment because the purchasing policy limits us to $10,000 of unbudgeted expenses.
Okay.
So if we have an emergency kind of situation, we need to hire an engineer, structural engineer to come in and look at one of the walls on the clarifier because it's falling apart, which we didn't know about, then typically we're gonna need to get that done pretty quick.
Okay.
Right? That's kind of the nature of unexpected expenses.
Okay.
So we do tend to budget this in Public Works fairly conservatively for that reason. And I hope it doesn't get viewed as a slush fund or anything
Okay.
like that, because we've never actually spent up the budget.
Okay.
But we do try and allow for it so that we're not in a jam without, not being able to address something that comes up, especially if the board has asked us to do that, right? So anyway, what we're generally planning on, we would cover kind of miscellaneous surveying, engineering, landscape design. It's all in the notes right here. But things that we basically just hadn't really fully vetted out. And this one especially feels more kind of general. It's in the public, that's why it's in the Public Works, because that's anyway.
Awesome. Those are my questions for Public Works on that one. Thank you.
Question was brought from the community as to uniforms. They thought that seemed extremely high. Could you tell me more about the uniforms?
These are the uniforms for the entire department, 28 people, first of all. We do buy uniforms for our staff, and we actually get pretty good deals on it. That's a lot of staff. And it doesn't take too many asphalt jobs to run through quite a few shirts and things like that. But we have a very well-defined uniform policy, which we could share with whoever wanted to see that.
Well, for about 30 people, $500 a person each year, I think that seems.
Yeah.
That seems,
That's cheap.
yeah.
Is it laundry service too?
No,
No, that's still.
I'm gonna wash this shirt myself.
I'm just wondering.
Not asking the town to
You know,
wash.
like at our shop, all of our uniforms are laundry service, and it's, we have like 12 guys, and it costs us that much.
Yeah.
That's all.
We
I
may
need
have a
to be able
laundry
to
service
explain.
out at the wastewater plant,
We do.
just because we don't
Have
really
to
want
make
them
sure.
carrying that home with them, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing regarding that safety workwear and equipment, that seems so low. Like. for
Well, that's
PPE and
just,
safety.
that's primarily, the office people. right?
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
we
I was
just
like,
don't
how
have
you-
the same kind of, PPE needs that the field folks do.
Okay, okay. That's good. All right, that was my only question, and only because it was brought to me, so I think that's very easy to explain.
No questions.
I'm assuming that the cut to the R&M machinery and equipment budget, that's due to the purchase of a loader, presumably.
That's more related to a bit of a change, and Charity kind of hit on this. Last year, or maybe it was the year before last, we were trying to kind of route all fleet rolling stock type of expenses so that one person could manage that and we could make that person accountable for it. But it didn't quite come to fruition the way we had envisioned. So you'll see some numbers that change more based on how we're redirecting those primarily within the funds. So a lot of that got moved back to the funds. And so this is really just strictly the equipment, within this, are you talking about row 25 there?
20.
20. Yeah, so, yeah, that's basically pickups and some of these other items of plow trucks and stuff like
Got
that.
it. Okay.
So it's
Okay.
just streets, just those people that are in public works that I mentioned earlier, their vehicles basically.
Got it.
Instead of trying to
Pack everything.
consolidate all that into one program.
Understood. That's all I got.
Any questions?
No.
Is to streets and upgrades.
It's okay,
So
don't
sorry,
worry.
trustee.
So I know that it was noted and not to get anyone into trouble or anything like that. There was slight jealousy over the tool availability at the wastewater plant compared to the water plant. When they go through, it was cute. When they went through, when you guys go through your guys' plant upgrade, are they going to have kind of the set general amount of tools available to them that the wastewater plant has available to them?
Do we want to address that when we get to the water and sewer budgets?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's
apologies. I'm sorry. I was looking at public works and
That's
we were
okay.
talking about
That's okay.
machinery and equipment, so.
That was also.
They
just
get
a
kind
little
of,
bit
they
of-
are kind of repetitive across all the.
It was a little bit of like camaraderie, teasing back and forth.
Yes, it
Tools
was
can be
too. It
controversial.
was. That's what I'm saying is just their tentative plan to have more availability of those tools when the water plant
We are
does.
going to get everybody the tools they need.
Got it. That was my only question.
Yeah, street funds, who's ready? Trustee Mason.
We're doing revenue first or? Operating.
We'll do operating. Sorry. we're not
You're good.
clear.
I think I'm good for now.
Trustee Teets,
Nope, I have no questions on this one.
trustee Gator.
I think I only had one on the streets, and this comes down to line 55, which is weed control. I know we had a group of residents speak to us last year about concerns about the town using Roundup and some of the implications of that. And we had said that we weren't going to follow through on that just because it was so expensive to pursue other alternatives. But then I see the note here that Roundup has doubled in price. And so the question is that bringing us more in line with some of those alternatives now with Roundup having increased so greatly in price?
Really should have said glyphosate.
I just
pesticide,
learned about
herbicide.
this word.
That's
Like,
going
they
much
told
better
me about
term. I'm probably mispronunciating that, but
Yeah.
we should have used that word because we've already moved on from Roundup and we're using another
Oh, okay.
herbicide with the same active ingredient. And yeah, we have done, when we look at this all the time, and I know we're gonna work with parks to kind of do a little test plot. And That's still in the works, I think.
So are you more using this for success rate and killing weeds than you are?
It's actually cost competitive with the other types of herbicides. In it, we just find that it's far more effective. I know there's controversy about it, but the EPA has looked at it, and the PPE requirements for this are actually less than some of the other herbicides out there. So we've gone through the MSDA sheets and looked at the hazards associated with each according to the EPA. Whether or not you believe that is a matter of personal opinion, I suppose. But I've never really noticed that the EPA is not. Usually they tend to be conservative about such things in my experience.
I will say I have experienced someone using a more potent, different name brand, and he possibly killed half of our backyard in overspray because it creeps, to my understanding. So I zero-scaped my backyard because I was not planting grass again. That is one of the reasons. So I will
The
say
water
that there
utility
is.
things.
Yeah, so we did try the one that would like wipe out forever, and it did end up wiping out forever, but it had like a 5-foot creeping circle, and he did not read the details on it, so.
I read those fine beans.
Oh my gosh.
That's right. That was another question.
Are we baking in enough inflation cost increase for electricity for streetlights? I see 4% up in usage and 5% on costs. I know that's the wrong way on budget discussion, but I'm worried that numbers will lie.
We did add an inflation cost on all the utilities, and I think it was 5% or 6%. That might be a little low.
It's a little lighter than some other electric, I know it's not always apples to apples, but it's a little lighter than some of the other electricity increases across, so. He's not exactly saying to tick that up, I'm worried that's a little low.
Trustee Davis.
I'm excited about getting the chipper services for that.
Want you guys to know what that cost.
Yeah.
That would have been one of those unanticipated expenses in past years.
Happy to see snow related stuff up.
Yes,
I was like, yay.
we did try and, well, that's why they're safe to be assigned, they're new, and so we're trying to. Some of this was fairly opaque because we've been using the same language for 100 years. And so we're trying to make it a little more descriptive.
And then I feel like you consolidated the cold mix crack seal from the other line items into just street maintenance.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. That's easier. That makes, yeah. I don't need to know the actual products. So it helps me for sure.
That was the idea.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Do you see any places in there you can cut if we have to get to that point?
Some of the smaller items is what it would look like. We point out that our operating budget went down this year in all of our funds except for the sewer operating fund. So not discounting salaries, just the actual operating expenses. And there's just a whole lot of fat in here, to be honest.
You're not really dreaming here. This is all.
Yeah, and we're always conscious of saving money as we go. It's not something that happens once a year. It's something that happens every day, right? And it needs to be part of the culture, and it has become part of the culture in public works. And I don't think the town in general. So I can guarantee you that we're not buying more Roundup than we need, even though it's not Roundup anymore.
I guess we will move on to the revenue. Start with. Trustee Keats.
For just the streets fund,
Yeah.
there's nothing in here as far as my questions go.
Trustee Mason.
I'm good.
Trustee.
Good.
Trustee Bailey.
The sales tax is related to all of the additional sales tax going to parks, correct?
So how we split the sales tax this year is we did a 55-45 split between streets and parks.
Okay.
To try to help the park fund, because the street fund is more stable than the park fund.
All right, so that's representing then the 40 or 45%,
The 55% in the streets,
55%.
about 1% of our 3% total.
Okay, and that's the total of anything that would go to streets. There's no other allocation from sales tax, correct? All right, that's my only question, because it looks like it's significantly less, but that makes sense for that reason.
Yeah, for 22, we budgeted all of it to streets.
Yeah, no other questions?
And. And nothing further, sorry.
And all those grant dollars.
Yeah. That's looking good.
Yeah.
The only thing that I had is, I too like the grants and everything coming in. The only concerns I had was in regards to now the motor vehicle use tax, is that on purchases? Is that on just registration, or where does that come from?
That is what we received from the county, and I will have to verify if it's registration or purchases.
Okay, I know we did have a little bit of a decrease in motor vehicles spec ownership. I'm not sure which ones in this revenue are tied to purchases. But again, looking at if we see the economy start to kind of come slowing down as it's been looking like it might, we could potentially see some drops in some of those revenues, which could put us in an interesting spot.
If follow this link, it gives you the full breakdown
Okay.
of where it goes.
So that was my only thought on the revenues, was just being cautious about what that's going to look like if some of those things taper off, how we're going to address that.
Well,
I think so. And then the ones at the bottom, are those the CIPs, or those are also grants and money coming in? I was a little unclear as. So we had grants transfer from street fund impact fees. Is that a grant, or is that just money that we had that we transferred over?
That's impact fees for master planning, the study of the long-term road street needs for town.
Okay, got it. That's it. That's all I got.
Quick question on a grant. What's the safe routes to school one? Is that one
That's
for this
the
next year?
HSIP grant.
That's the HS.
Yeah. Little shy of 300,000.
You look at the actual Excel document.
Trustee Daly.
Yeah, thank you.
Trustee Keys. Okay. On to the drainage budget, we'll start with operating. And. Trustee Wiggins. No questions. Trustee Mason.
No, this looks great.
Trustee Keys.
So the drainage fund in general, and you'll have to explain this one just a little bit to me, the decrease. To my understanding is. You're looking at total revenues coming in, or is this cost going out? For the drainage fund,
Drainage budget operating is the expenditures.
got it. So,
Are you looking at the operating budget or revenue right now?
so I'm looking in the operating budget.
Okay, perfect.
No, I don't have any questions at this time.
Trustee Gator.
I think just to clarify, the authority utility plans, that's just a pass through, right? We collect we get billed those, we bill those to people, they pay to us, we turn around and pay it to box out there. That's okay, perfect. Professional fees, the 20,000 in there, what is that for in drainage?
This one's a little bit more specific. We're wanting to get a jump on the modeling for the stormwater outfall for the Cleveland Avenue project, and
Okay.
it turns out it was a good idea we budgeted that, because one of our engineers learned at the Association of Floodplain Managers meeting thing that he just went to, that the state is changing their requirements for modeling.
Shocker.
Yeah, no, it's a shocker, and so we're gonna have to kind of retool some of the things that we put together for the master plan. And so that's pretty much gonna eat up all that 20,000.
Okay, got it. That was my only question for drainage. Thank you.
So less impact fees and licenses in general, just like killing us all across the board, right? So let's say with the new rates, we see significant use of water, would we then mid-year amend and consider doing more building permits?
Well, the number of permits that we kind of landed on a couple of years ago was 300 until the plants come on. So Cody worked pretty closely with the existing developers, kind of plan that out.
Okay.
And so we're just still following the same script that we followed for a year or two now. And that just happened to look like fewer permits in
Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
And just some additional context to that, part of what the arrangements that we worked out with the developers to manage that, to meet the capacity needs, was a little bit more front loaded because they had leveraged capital
Right.
and wanted to recover their investment costs. So that's why we see it was disproportionately weighted to the front end, and now we're down to 80 because it's wrapping up projects tail end for some of those development projects.
This is a bigger conversation, but I'm wondering if we should revisit that and consider if we could do more building permits this next year, because I mean, that might be the padding that we need if we can handle it capacity wise. So that's my only worry, because I mean, that's what I see killing us across the board in every single
That's gonna be more.
revenue consideration for anything related to impact fee, and that's all of our funds, so.
And I will say this was a conversation that had at the finance committee yesterday, is one of the biggest things we need to look at is what is. What can we do to help drive more revenue? I think there's two sides, right? What can we do to cut, which I again appreciate staff doing that, but also looking at what are additional sources of revenue that we can try to figure out what do those look like. And what has to happen, what does that mean if we choose to go down that road? I think just with. Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Go into
Policy
next, sorry.
stuff.
I mean,
But
going
it's a
from
good
80
conversation. I
to
mean,
100
great,
could be
great.
pretty significant
Yes.
change across all the funds, so, okay, I just want to throw that out there, because I just see, I see the revenues cut on every single
Well,
budget.
I will say, we can just budget the revenues conservatively
Mhm.
and keep an eye on them and see if we're ahead of schedule.
Yeah,
And if that's a discussion we have to have later on because we're not seeing those revenues come in the way we hope.
yeah,
Or if they're surpassing our expectations, then we can kind of hold off on that larger discussion.
I would really like to address that policy wise, maybe
And just to add
into the year.
quick thought, this is really a question about risk management,
Right.
right? Weighing the risk of not being able to serve
Right.
water and sewer, the cost of that, the implications to this town, the implications to future growth. One newspaper article on such a topic. Bye-bye, some developers, right? So quantifying that risk is frankly is very difficult.
Yeah, scary.
And,
And I know how much work went into that initially, so I mean,
Well, we've had a couple of good years, right? We've had some rain in the summer.
Mhm.
And it is true that our demand has gone down from that shocking peak that we had during the COVID summer in
Right.
2020. So, so the question is, do we want to take on additional risk of not being able to serve or not? And, seeing as how
budget
we're
versus risk.
the ones that have to answer those questions eventually, we're
Yeah,
highly interested in that question of risk management.
Mayor, I don't know if you can see me over here. I was gonna, if I may, dovetail into that a little bit too, and just point out on the growth and development. Your budget on the revenue side we don't include anything on the commercial revenues for commercial impacts and commercial building fees. The challenge with a community this size, we don't know, we can't guarantee, we can't compare one year to another for commercial because it could be a couple of small projects, or it could be one really big project that has a big impact. And so there is some conservatism built into those revenues. And when Bob and I went through the development plans for, so, making sure that we have capacity to serve, we did build in some capacity for future commercial in that equation. So we want to be able to welcome businesses when they come to the town, and we would get some additional revenue benefits from those that aren't currently reflected in your budget.
So as a result, we haven't had to turn away any business
Yeah.
development.
Mhm.
Not that we've had a whole lot of it.
So what I'm hearing is the more low water using commercial development is all bonus dollars.
Industry, retail are great because they provide good
Office.
revenues, good business, good jobs, and not a lot of water use.
That just adds, is not included in any of the revenue. Okay, thank you. That gave me a lot to work with right there.
There you go.
Yes, I needed that. Thank you so much.
All right, anything further?
No, I'm good. I'm very excited, actually.
Trustee Regan? Can I start with you?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay. On to revenues for drainage. Trustee David.
1 second.
Oh, you got time. I said
All right.
David.
They don't.
I said trustee David.
Oh, I'm
You got
sorry.
time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I said Peter too.
I heard Peter. Did I say?
No.
I
Oh.
Change. Sorry. Go for it.
You started talking, so I was like.
Sorry.
I don't have any questions.
Mayor Shosse, we also have this drainage CIP on that same
Yes.
sheet. It was, I did not identify that on the.
After the revenue.
Mhm.
Correct. Okay,
Yeah,
so it had the
yeah.
contribution to B dance. That's in this part, right?
Mhm.
So.
And this is in accordance with that first proposal.
That will be in the CIP.
Yeah, we put it there easier to track. and
Yeah.
Some of them could be CIP level expenses.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that was good to me.
Trustee Gill.
I just had 2 questions. What all is entailed in the dam improvements? Is that like the sensors and stuff that we've been talking about, or is this a separate thing, or?
No, it's everything that we kind of talked about in the joint electeds meeting.
Okay.
The early flood warning system. The maintenance and basically calling it escrow account, the money that we would be putting away for future major maintenance improvements. So this was the first cut, and like we talked about at that meeting.
With the commissioner.
Yeah, with the commissioners, I'm not sure I agree with it, to be honest. But there's a lot more considerations than just my opinion here, so we're hoping to kind of get in depth on this early next year. I don't think there's any big rush on this, so it is something we can take our time on, which is unusual. So we might want to enjoy that.
Okay, and this is shared, so everyone's putting in certain amounts and.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
And then the Box Elder Creek 134, the map revision, what's that for? Why are we doing it?
We're doing it because FEMA and the state, they've had this restudy going on for the Box Elder. Really all the floodplains that go through town. And they basically created a floodplain that adds something like 50 residents into the floodplain. So those folks would have to purchase flood insurance for any kind of federally underwritten loans. Some of them they put in the floodway, and we argued with them about this for years. And basically they're telling us that if we want to do a LOMAR, that we can go ahead and get started on that. And as soon as that physical map revision, the DFIRM, they call it, is adopted, the next day they'll adopt our LOMAR to remove these structures back out of the floodplain.
Got it.
So
basically we can help our residents that are gonna get thrown into a floodplain because of them by us
Yes.
doing this map.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And
That's all I need to hear.
That was one of my huge questions, because I also looked at that map. Will that cover, do you know if that covers just those in our town, or does that cover properties that are around the town of Wellington as well?
The D firm is a countywide effort, so
Got
it goes all over the county. Our work would be limited to the current town limits.
Got it.
No. Sorry.
No, and we're only on revenues right now, right?
Inside
Oh,
NCIP.
Oh, got it. The SDF 231, is that the D firm that you're talking about? Or is that,
What? Where are you looking?
Oh, that's line 32,
Oh,
regional drainage improvement.
Oh.
You're calling it by the project.
No,
Sorry.
this is, as you know, we're kind of finishing up the stormwater master plan right now. We know we're going to have big projects, but we haven't put a number to them yet. So we basically just kind of program this money out here so that we know we're gonna have some expensive, I think these might be a little bit low. But we put them in here to get used to the idea that we're gonna have some regional improvements, we hope, fall out of that master plan, and this is the money that we programmed in. Just you can see how that affects the bottom line of the fund. And you see the fund is reasonably healthy at the bottom line. So that might be what we stick to, or we might be able to beat that up a little bit, you know, when we get to that point. Before we propose to spend that money, that's why it's programmed out in the future. You guys would see the results of the master plan again, you have a hand in prioritizing those projects and understanding what the cost of those are.
I appreciate you putting it on the radar.
Yeah, we'll lose track.
On that note, I did just want to make a request, maybe at a later meeting. I did not, in thoughts of time, I did not look at any of the future. I only looked at the CIPs that were budgeted for 23. I would like to make sure that at maybe one of our future budget sessions, we do kind of talk about some of those future plan things, whether they should or shouldn't be on the CIP. I didn't want to go through it now because just be more time consuming, but just so you guys are aware, I would like to go through those in the future and maybe just looking at all the CIPs that are planned out for a long period of time, and deciding what should or shouldn't be on there. So,
Is that something you want to address for the 2023 budget?
well, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we approved the budget, while we're only approving expenditures in 23, we're also improving a 5-year CIP, which has all the other stuff on that. Am I incorrect in that understanding?
It's a plan.
I think it would be a daunting task to pull that off for 2023 with our staff. Little shortages and how
Well,
we're auditing.
No,
It's about-
that's a question.
To keep in mind, you have your CIPs starting for 23,
Sure.
right? They
Yep.
can last 5 years. We can add that to that every budget
Sure.
cycle, make it fluid.
Yep.
So what I really need from you right now is the direction of where you want your 2023 CIP to start. And then next budget cycle, when we have more time and we can address it, let's plan this out when we can start budget meetings come June.
Okay.
Would that be a good compromise?
I'd say.
I'll chat with you more about it later, and I'll walk through what's in my brain and we can figure it out from there. So.
I mean, that's acceptable to me, and if we're providing you direction, I think that is the route that we should go for this budget cycle.
I think it's fair for where we're at and what we've been through,
Yeah, because I'd hate
but
for
yes,
Yeah,
us to give you that impression, and then later on you receive different direction, so
definitely we're
I think
moving forward
That's
future wise.
viable.
Well, and especially since we're also going through an audit to do.
Yes,
I
we have
think
the
that it's
2021,
accepted, yeah.
2022 audit.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to get done.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, I would support looking at that maybe in 2023.
I do appreciate your foresight on this and how we need to structure this, but I think right now, where we're at financially, we really need to see where 2021 ends up
sure.
with our actuals, where we're at year to date with 2022, And then moving forward, I don't know what the next 5 years are gonna look like
Right.
financially.
Yep.
And I don't feel very comfortable trying to set specific parameters on those kinds of projects when I can't
Okay,
tell you
got
for
it,
certain where we're gonna be.
got it, that makes sense. That makes sense. I just would almost prefer we. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it later. What you said makes complete and total sense, and I agree with you.
Wants and needs, you know?
No, I agree. I'd almost prefer it to be blank if we're not gonna,
Uh,
but I understand. We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
I'm good with what the board is saying. I just want to unload my brain a little bit and make sure that I'm understanding things, so, but we can do that at a later time.
Okay.
Anything further? Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
was that a head shake? Oh,
was a
got
head
it. I
shake.
thought you were going. She's like, "Let's do that."
Okay, so on to water budget operating.
Sewer or water?
I water.
Water. Okay.
Water, sorry.
Yeah, look at the agenda.
Start with trustee Regan.
Nothing at the moment.
Trustee Daly. Comment?
Can you come back to me on my last?
Trustee Gator?
All right. Do we have a rough idea why the jump in propane, so line 44, again, I understand that 2021, we may or may not be accurate, so I get that. We kind of went 18 to 24, and now we're going to 28. Do we know what's driving kind of just those continued jumps in the propane costs?
Same thing, this driving all the.
Okay.
all the
Exactly.
records,
We're cleaning a dirty house.
The R and M machinery and equipment kind of doubled from 21 to 22. Was that more of just bringing everything into one place? Well, no, because this is for water. Do we know kind of why we had that jump in the equipment costs there?
Some of that was for the reason that I was explaining earlier, when we were trying to lump everything together.
Okay.
A lot of those costs were in PW admin back then.
Got it.
And so since then, we're trying to reallocate in the appropriate way. So this is primarily rolling stock. And non-process related equipment.
Okay,
So,
got it.
so
Perfect. Testing line 50, so like 2 lines, 3 lines down. Why did that double? Again, understanding 21 may or may not be accurate, but roughly, I mean, we're consistent with 22, but that was a pretty big jump from 40 to 80,000.
So, yeah, that's a little bit, we're reactive to things like there's EPA rules that come out every year on non-monitored, or what do they call it, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, right? So that dictates every year some additional contaminants that are unregulated contaminants that the EPA puts the burden on the water utilities to be testing for. We have a really unfortunate situation wherein as of 2020, we crossed a 10,000 person threshold. That puts us into no longer qualifying for federal funding. They used to pick up the tab for that additional testing. They don't do that anymore because we were 10,000 people. So all of a sudden,
So
we're not
do we have
small.
to pay for this?
All of a sudden, we're not a small utility. There's that. There was also, we incurred some additional costs with lead and copper rule mandates. How we're doing those testings. We have hired some contracting with the company to help us get those samples taken at individual homes throughout town. That was an increased cost in 2022 that we hadn't seen, or in 2022 that we hadn't seen in 2021. I think from what I'm looking at, we likely won't spend that full 80,000 in 2022. But we are gonna have yet an additional cost increase with additional testing in 2023 for PFAS and lithium. And I would bet we'll probably spend all 80 of that in 2023.
I would say in general, water testing is just going up for both utilities. And you'll see this in the sewer fund too.
Yep.
It aggravates the heck out of us, but.
You gotta do it.
Again, CPA,
Yeah, a lot of rules.
Professional services, so just kind of what are we using that for in the water fund?
So the bulk of it this year is gonna be used for the rate study.
Okay.
So it's as we put in there, is kind of emerging needs, things that come up that were sort of unforeseen, rate study, defeasance. And then also some kind of what we've titled like impending needs, things that we know that are coming, but it will hinge a little bit on priority. Do they catch on fire and need to be addressed right away? Do we have staff capacity to do it as well? And when we have the ability to jump on them, we kind of need to. There was a couple of examples put in here. Some of that is related to like emerging contaminant research. So we are prepared to figure out best ways to be doing our sampling in order to respond to the compliance and changing regulations. You know, if we get into a spot where we need to be developing more robust leak detection services, you know, it's our ability to be able to respond.
we've been struggling with implementing an asset management system for a couple of years now. So we feel like part of this money will go towards that as well.
And then the line right below that is, this is, I think, the safety workwear that Trustee Daly was speaking to earlier. Could you just kind of give a walkthrough? Because obviously it's a large number, but I would imagine it's because we're not talking about your nylon gloves and your, regular face mask. So if you could just kind of explain kind of what that is, because again, that's a pretty significant jump from the 7,500 roughly in 22 budget to 20,000. So I know you mentioned in the notes are kind of keeping up to speed. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, some of it is an internal changing process in how we think about safety amongst our staff. And that we're not looking to, especially in places where we're handling a lot of chemicals, granular or powder activated carbon, chemicals at both facilities. We have a history here in the town of Wellington of sometimes cutting corners, reusing gloves, reusing Tyvek suits, reusing respirators.
Yeah.
Things that go against safety regulations, and that's not an acceptable way to do things. And so I actually have, if you really want some details, DJ put together a pretty robust list of what it could be. And his list was like 55 grand is what we could be spending.
Okay.
This is assuming, a Tyvek suit per person per day, but to be honest, a case, which is 28, a case of Tyvek suits, that's $200. That's only 28 or 25 per case.
Okay.
And you're in, they're using multiple staff using one a day.
Got it.
And
Okay.
respirators, gloves, and these are boots, rubber boots, face shields, earplugs,
Okay.
fall protection, work gloves, not just nylon, like,
Right.
but work gloves, ear protection, gas monitors.
Okay.
Calibration inspection of those monitors. I mean, it's not, and hence we put it in, we've recategorized that and not be thinking about this as a PPE situation.
I appreciate it.
'Cause
Also,
it's-
this ties into our source insurance, so when they come and do our on-site inspections, they're gonna make sure that we have
Right.
adequate amounts of all of that. And when we do, that's when our rates go down, so they go hand in hand.
So that's,
And the
yeah,
majority of those are all one time.
a lot of it's almost like, when you go to the hospital sometimes and I've never felt so bad about how much they generate so much trash.
Yeah.
And it is when there's so much one-time use protection. So I mean, some of that will change. We know some of that will change when we're being able to step away from that powder activated carbon at the water treatment plant and moving to ozone, so some of that will reduce it in time, but we also are stepping up, like our fall protection needs. We have to do inspections for our tanks. It's those 1 and 2 million gallon tanks. These guys have to get on top of these tanks. And they're not gonna do that, just winging it up the ladder.
No more good old boy days.
No,
Exactly.
that's
Good.
exactly right.
Probably a lot less people with cancer though.
So, it is a big number and it's probably the most important number in any one of these
Great.
budgets.
I appreciate the breakdown, and that's really what I was looking for, and again, I appreciate the explanation, because that when it was only as PPE, my deal goes to PPE, but normally like, what? But I appreciate the breakdown of, hey, we're using this stuff every day, that has to be thrown out and then reused, and it's keeping our place safe, so much appreciated. Thank you for the breakdown of the professional development, much appreciated with all that. The R&M distribution, I do see where you pull some things like the hydrants and other areas into that line item, so that made sense. I did want to get an idea of, with the meters portion that's included in that's line 63, how much of that 80,000, now when we talk about meters, is like upgrading meters, is this replacing broken meters? What?
This is hydrant meters, so not,
Okay, that's what 63 is talking, so 64 is hydrant. So you're talking about in 63, the meters, they were talking about hydrant meters, is that?
hydrant meters and hydrant supplies, yep, in service. And
Look
so
at
that's
the same-
essentially that combined, so that budget line item,
Distribution at 100% increase, that one you're looking at? David?
yeah.
Yeah, that's, yeah, okay.
So that line item increased by 40,000, 30,000 of that came from, we combined 2 other lines, a 10,000 line and a $20,000 line.
Got it.
And then there was also a little over 10% increase to try and capture this world of pipe and hydrants and, oh my gosh, talk about cost increases. It's unbelievable. And supply chain ridiculousness, like 8 months to get hydrants.
You should try a generator.
That's
It's
all
a heart attack.
we're having issue, we're having issue
It's
getting
a heart
supplies
attack.
for some generator repairs too.
Good, I think there's one other question on there, but that can wait, so, thank you.
Oh, okay.
So I want to say thank you because I am one of the ones when I was running for trustee that this was a big thing for me in understanding what PPE was. This is huge for that understanding. I buy all of this equipment listed and it is one of our biggest line items as a business because we do air monitors. We do fall protection harnesses for roof crawling. This is actually a decent number when you look at you're doing it for a town compared to us as a small business. I mean, our prices are up in these numbers. So one, I'm jealous of the cost you probably are getting this at. But it gives so much more explanation to everybody that I appreciate having this listed out because as PPE, I say, what the heck, but as safety and it makes so much more sense. Does this include the cost of inflation?
It does actually, yeah, in most
Okay.
cases,
Got it.
definitely too.
And then my other question, or really truly is more along the lines of a comment, is extremely happy to see the 2001 line items retired at 100%. So if you flip over to the water fund and you go down, you see the 2001 CWR and PDA loan principal.
Oh,
And it
yeah,
just says retired, so that's
paid off.
always a good thing to look at when you're looking at debt. But those are my other things. Mine was mainly just a comment to say that this made much more sense to me than it did last year when we were reviewing budget.
I'm good.
Good.
No questions. Just want to echo trustee Teets's compliments on the detail and finance committee as a whole. It's a bunch of county finance and numbers people. We really appreciate it and help us go through really well. So thank you.
And you did did you want to readdress that question now? Or?
It was just in the lab equipment, why there was a jump on that. Let me find my line here, line 76. It came down from 25, but we went up from 10,000 to 25,000 and down to 20,000. So I'm just curious why the jump in 2021.
So we're getting working really hard to become more analytical in our treatment and how we are operating our processes, and that requires continued lab equipment and improvements. We probably won't hit the full 25, but we're more than halfway there already this year, and there are a couple more pieces of equipment we're looking to purchase, and the same will go as we're continuing to, again, try and be way more analytical in how we're managing our processes. Let's just tweak our chemicals and so hopefully there's budget savings there. It's this sort of balancing act for sure.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you.
Onto sewer operating budget. Start with.
You said Gator this time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just said Dave.
No, yeah, that's big. All right, I think it's my first one. Just gonna make an assumption here, the R&M machinery equipment, similar to what we just talked about in water, correct? Just moving things back from general to the fund itself. Perfect. Professional services, this one was a really large jump from the 5,000 roughly in 2021 to 80,000 in 22, and then dropped back down to 60. Was it just like specific projects that kind of anticipated that jump, or?
I will say that were there special projects identified in that 80,000, they didn't get to be done because the majority of that went to pay for Kutek Rock for the defeasance.
Got it, okay,
And
okay.
then the Raftella study.
Got it,
That
okay.
line item's currently ever so slightly over that budget at this point. There was a few $1,000s that was utilized in there for some additional monitoring for some things that came out of that. So as far as the reduction to 60,000, that's, trying to be fiscally responsible, knowing that we're still gonna have the same kind of emerging contaminant, research if nothing else. Other, I hate the word unforeseen, that's where our, what fancy word did we use? Instead of unforeseen, emerging, there you go, emerging. The known unknowns, right? You don't know some things.
And then safety workwear, same as water, right? That we just talked about.
Yeah, it is. And this one, they had already gone through and purchased a lot of they don't have quite as, well, I don't have the tanks that they're getting up in elevation,
Got
but
it,
they've
okay.
already had done a lot of their like air monitor purchasing and stuff
Okay.
previously. So they're not, the water plant, to be honest, is playing some catch up.
Okay.
The wastewater plant,
Plays with more chemicals, correct?
they do, yeah. They do.
Correct. With the professional development, so that was again, kind of had a big jump from that from 21 to 22. And then I know they talked about like trainings in schools. Are a lot of these more local, or these online? Are we sending people out of state? What does that typically look like with how those trainings in schools and stuff work?
With this budget that you see here, I mean, it's virtually the same. It just didn't get written down quite the same with
Got
the, as the water budget. None of these are out of state trainings to date, which is unfortunate because there actually are some like pump and some mechanical trainings that we could be sending the guys to that I'd like to look into a little bit further, but currently these are for in-state trainings and training schools. The catch is some of it is like for example, the Leadville Operator School, that's a little more expensive to send somebody to Leadville to do rather than what's at the Embassy Suites Loveland, but we can't have all of them gone at the same time.
Right.
And there's literally only two offerings a year. So, and then, trying to get some opportunity in there for some conference attendance. It's incredible exposure for the staff to be learning how other folks are tackling similar problems in the region. And all of these are all local to Colorado conversations, trainings.
Trustee Gator, can I piggyback off that?
Go for it.
So are those not implying any sort of like not necessary trainings? Are they like need to have or nice to have? And I ask because like, is that kind of in line with some of our employee retention, larger goals, ongoing efforts, like the guy's gonna be happy that this is like, is it, or this is just, these are the box I need to check.
The,
To do my
some
job.
of them are, yeah, must have in order to be meeting their training units that they have to keep their certifications or to allow them to cert up. Conferences, maybe not as much, however, conferences translate into training units as well. And there is a certain amount of training units that they have to have, training credits, training units that you have to have in order to keep your certification valid every year. So it's very similar to
Like I see.
probably a variety of professional, yeah, a variety of professional organization or certification programming. Engineering is the same way.
The committee had some back and forth on that and we kind of landed on having some nice to haves rather than only. the bare
Only must
minimum
haves.
is nice.
It is nice.
It's a
And
little thing, but it goes a long way.
yeah, that's where we're trying to get, that's also where some of this pricing has included even some, the hope to being able to attend some webinars, additional webinars that also cost money, even though it feels like they should be free. It's like, there's like no
Certified.
facility
There
or
and
anything. I know it costs money to develop the material, but, so some of those extras as well. So, and this covers the cost of our testing. We cover the cost of testing when the guys are looking to recertify or to cert up, right?
This is another area where we're playing catch up, to be honest. We just did not have
Time.
our positions filled.
Yeah.
We're short on people and it was just emergency after emergency. And before you know it, you've got your head down, you're working 50 hours, 60 hours a week, and you haven't been able to go to anything. I've been here 4.5 years and I've never been to any kind of training or seminar on the town's
Changing
done.
that.
I'm gonna change that this year.
We work in different.
I'll make
fields,
one
My
for
experience.
you.
dealing
Thank
with mine,
It is
It goes, you spend $400 on a couple of employees and it goes.
So
way more
far.
than $400.
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's so invigorating too.
Essentially like paying for a test or whatever, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
one of those like, okay, it's nice when you have it. If you don't get it paid for, it's
Oh, yeah.
it's the worst, right?
Yeah.
It's just-
So.
so Anyways, great to hear. Thank you.
Questions? Were you done?
My only other question I have is about tools, but I'll let trustee Teets ask that question.
Got it on
Okay,
here.
well, I'm gonna make this circle since we started. that.
I'm good.
Good. I'm good.
I'm good.
Back, to trustee.
I did have a question on school. I guess my question is there must be a specific reason why tools are way more utilized in sewer funds than they are in the water funds.
Is there, I don't know that I could justify that. What is
Maybe they're dropping them down in this clarifier.
the?
They're not dropping them. in the
You know they're watching.
I know. Definitely not. But I do think that they're hoping to do a little bit more in-house maintenance, kind of rebuilding pumps, stuff like that. And so, again, I think this is another area where they're trying to catch up.
When we saw like the sewer, I mean, they're pretty similar, like one's 6,000, one's 8,000. Is that what
Yeah.
you're?
Yeah.
Yes, they're pretty similar. And I know it sounds interesting, like $6,000 on small tools,
No,
but
it doesn't.
okay,
I
well, yeah.
promise you.
Probably, that's true. Both of them.
So,
probably
yeah.
really know.
No,
To the non-contract construction person in the room, I looked at 6,000, I'm like, how do you spend $6,000 on screwdrivers? And barely
Yeah.
find screwdrivers.
Yeah,
And not only that, but you have to look at tools you wear out.
they do wear out.
So, and depending on how much you
4,
use
5,
them,
6
it's
people use them a day, every day.
and on how quick you're replacing those, and hopefully buying quality tools
Helps.
that have a good warranty on them.
No.
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 Try not to go to Harvard.
We are trying not to go to Harbor Freight anymore. That's actually one of the points that
Yeah.
that was made to me. Was we are doing our best to buy Might not be Snap-on, but it's definitely not Harbor Freight.
Yeah.
Roughly splitting the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's just not cost effective by the time you replace those so many. You could have just bought a middle ground tool and not have
Talk to my
to
husband about that too.
do that as much. So I track spending on our tools and I'm constantly scolding because I always ask, I was like, did you really need this many hand drills? And I get a look and then I just stop asking. So, but they do wear out and I get it, but it's good to hear that we're buying something that holds up more. The small tools, I guess I just didn't see it in,
The water budget,
yeah.
It's
line 60.
It's in there.
It's in there. It's line 60. It's right below internet service, right above construction material. In the R&M plant. it's right
Which
above
that one stands out big, because that's a big number.
Yes.
Oh, there, got it. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so-
maybe I saw the 120 and kind of just skipped.
Yeah,
over.
right, and it blinded you to the other smaller numbers.
Right, perfect. Okay, so there is fund for tools for
tactic.
both
Oh,
departments.
yeah.
If you looked at the 22 budget, it was 5,000 in sewer, it was 12,500 in water. So if you looked at the 22 number, there was a huge difference. But if you
Got
look
it,
at
yes,
23,
it's not as big of a difference.
Yeah.
I am curious about the to be assigned, the moved from CIP to O and M budget, so that is the 25,000% increase, is that just because we're reallocating?
Yeah,
from
it's because
another area?
there have been, so Arden pumps, there had been a previous pumps CIP line item.
Mhm.
They completed what was necessary with those budget dollars, but we were looking to track some of that information separately than just lumping it into the broader R&M plant. Because there is so many pumps involved in those processes and they want to be, have the dollars and be tracking it in its own line item, so we can figure out, replacement schedules easier and that kind of information.
The same thing with R&M.
SCADA, yeah.
Got it.
Want to drill down on that a little bit.
Perfect. And then the pump and mechanical that you guys had discussed, I had noticed that we've had some false failures with some of the pumps and whatnot. Is this pump mechanical training that you're discussing on possibly having to would that be of benefit in when you are working on rebuilding
Oh, yeah.
these
100%.
in-house?
Oh, yeah.
Because that right there and then, is it something where
Return on investment.
that is a benefit because buying a different pump or paying a tech to come out and replace that pump? Because is that what we're doing now, is we're paying to have someone come out
We have a
and
lot of tech.
Yeah, it's a mix,
Yeah.
it kind of depends on are people available usually. We're also trying to get more pumps and more equipment on the shelf, right? So that we don't have to go rush off and buy one, but those still have to be maintained, even if they're sitting on the shelf.
yeah,
So just that whole part of what we're doing is increasing a little bit.
so I would say that is probably extremely important as far as pump and mechanical. So I don't know, I know it's not added in this year, but if it's
For the
something
professional
that,
development, you mean?
for the education.
Yeah, professional
So,
development,
yeah, because
And that
we
could be,
save a lot of money not having to go out of house for that kind of stuff.
yeah, absolutely. Be a conversation for sure.
But that was my only other.
That wrap it up?
Not
9 minutes
So-
early.
9 minutes. early.
Next week, you will have a presentation of the LCSO contract during the regular meeting under presentation, because I don't want Fadberg and the crew having to stay later.
Okay.
Than they have to. We'll have our regular agenda and then we'll go into a work session. Items that will be on your agenda for the work session is water and sewer rates, impact fees, and your water and sewer CIP. So it's a lot, but we've just got a very short agenda that night, crossing my fingers it stays short. So, but we're trying to move you through the process and get all of this in front of you so you have ample time to talk about it here. So that when the time comes for public comment and adoption, you feel comfortable with what we've presented.
And then we will have opportunity to have conversation back and forth with LCSO on next meeting, correct?
Yes,
With
yes,
questions?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's a presentation, so no public comment,
Right,
but
but-
it'll, it's opportunity for the trustees
Yeah.
to talk, and I've let them know that.
And then I spoke with John Pan on Saturday. I was at an event that he was at, and so I've talked with him on and off about his thoughts with that, and I let him know if he's available, it might be great to come by just so he can hear our thoughts as we're going through that. And so he is planning to try and come out. So, but I know Sergeant Cherry said he's got the undersheriff and a bunch of other people are all coming out,
Yeah.
so I just want to give you guys a heads up. I talked to our incoming sheriff and he said he's gonna try and make it, so. Awesome. He'll be able to sit and listen as we're
There you
talking
go.
about our thoughts, so.
Absolutely. Well, the undersheriff, from what I understand, he's the one that has control of the
Yes,
budget.
yep,
so-
and that's what Sergeant Cherry
that's-
said, is he's the one that kind of oversees all that, so.
But he'll be a good add.
I'm the elected official, so I talk to the elected.
Thank you so much.
Daily.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I have one item too before we go. I think I just want to make it super clear so everybody's kind of on the same track of what the sunshine law does. So it says all meetings of 2 or more members of any state public body or any municipal public body where any public business is being discussed must be open to the public. This is like regarding like actionable items or like town business. So I just want to make it really clear. It's my integrity is something I hold very, very near to my heart. It's one of my most important personality traits, and I take it very seriously. So when I'm being accused of violating the sunshine law, it is hurtful and it doesn't help us work as a team. It is. We talk a lot about working together. I really go out of my way all the time to make sure everybody feels included and knows what's going on in the town. That's me walking the walk. So above and beyond talking the talk, I want to walk the walk. I want to make sure that everybody knows what opportunities are available. And I've been kind of chosen as the liaison from a lot of different organizations because they feel really comfortable with me and they trust me. But I don't want to use that selfishly. I want to spread that to everyone. So if and when I do ask you guys if you want to attend a event, there is no public business happening. I'm just trying to include you. And not only that, but the chamber needs to do planning. So if I need to buy a ticket, I want to buy a ticket. But I was offering to buy a ticket so that other people could use free tickets that are already allocated to the town. Because it's important to me to attend and to support the chamber. And I would gladly do that. If there are free tickets available, hey, I'll take a free ticket. But if there's not, I'd love to buy it so they can plan for capacity. So I'm sorry that if that was misunderstood in any way, but every time I invite you guys to events, and I mean, we've done a ton of stuff together and it's super fun. Know that that's my intent, is to support these community organizations. It is not to undermine or do any kind of secret business stuff. It's just to support our community. So if there is any questions though, and you are concerned, call me, talk to me. I am so approachable and I would love to talk to you guys about that. And if you think it's more worth a face-to-face conversation, I've done that with you guys too. If anybody has any concerns or questions, I will spend the time to make it right because I am really committed to working together. And I go way out of my way to make sure that happens if I hear any concerns or questions. So I'm open, I'm available. And I just want to support the chamber in this case, and Slurps, ribbon cutting on Friday.
Yeah. God, I love their.
I ate
Yeah, they have
I ate
good
there
food.
Saturday.
Favorite.
Yes, they
If
have
I
awesome
can,
food.
because I'm sure this is directed towards me from a conversation we had earlier this morning. I love hearing about events. I don't mind getting messages, emails about events. But when we're making suggestions on where gifts or allocations should go, so say, I think giving them tickets would be a nice gesture. That's when it oversteps the line, in my opinion. I'm waiting on clarification because the town taxpayers pay for those tickets. And then we're allocating them. That a suggestion or a gesture of a suggestion is where that hits that gray area.
I believe those tickets were given by the chamber.
Now they come to us with our membership, correct?
They are part
We
of the
purchase them.
membership.
Yeah.
So we don't-
purchase them.
I
So
don't know if
I
we-
don't want to be included.
We don't like direct purchase them. Yeah.
They come with our membership we buy. So that's where the line is crossed and I don't want to be included when that line is crossed. So that was kind of, I'm sorry, you got to speak. I'd like to speak for just one more second. I want to hear about the events going on in town. I have no problem with it. I don't want to become a quorum in that kind of discussion. And that's what I was meaning. So it wasn't a disconnect from me. It was just mainly saying, please don't include me in a message where anything asked or allocated is going to come up. It wasn't a question of any other
So
thing.
can I make a suggestion? I think that this is something I know Mr. Sapiens has kind of put together board policies for us to look through. I think this is a discussion we should have in that. I don't see that anything problematic is happening. I'm not real comfortable with group text messages either, just because it has a potential for someone accidentally putting it. But I think it's something that is a longer discussion we should have in when we do go through those policies versus trying to hash that out now.
For sure, for sure.
Yes.
I would
Okay.
say what happened today, in my understanding, was completely within the realm of completely legal. And yeah, wait to see what you hear from Dan, but
Yes.
I would say there was nothing, no lines crossed, nothing done wrong. So we'll just keep that in mind.
All right, thanks for hearing me out, guys.
Done.
We're done.
Okay,
All right.
cool beans. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. Let me turn that off for me.
So it's either under my name or under my name. So it's about how to